Welcome to Ancient Relics Keeper, where forgotten civilizations, unexplained wonders, and ancient secrets come back to life. Ready to unravel the mystery? Let's begin the journey. Long before the pyramids of Egypt or Stonehenge in England, a mysterious people in central Germany built a massive wooden structure. It wasn't a fortress or a village, but a precise celestial calendar, Europe's oldest known solar observatory. The Göbekli Circle forces us to ask, what advanced knowledge did these ancient people possess, and what secret rituals took place within its sacred walls? The story of Europe's oldest known temple to the sun and stars does not begin, as one might expect, with the careful unearthing of a long-lost artifact or the deciphering of a cryptic clue from an ancient manuscript. It does not start with the dedicated team of archaeologists, acting on a local legend or a promising geological survey, sinking their spades into the fertile German soil. Instead, the saga of the Göbekli Circle begins silently and almost poetically, thousands of feet in the air, with a secret that had been patiently hiding in plain sight, camouflaged by the mundane cycles of agriculture for nearly 7,000 years. Its discovery was an accident, a fortunate confluence of modern technology, historical opportunity, and the trained eye of a single individual who knew how to read the subtle language of the landscape. The year was 1991. The world was still reeling from the momentous collapse of the Berlin Wall just 2 years prior, an event that had sent geopolitical shockwaves across the globe. For Germany, it was a time of immense change and reunification, a complex process of stitching together two nations that had been ideologically and physically separated for more than 4 decades. This new era of openness had many profound consequences, but one of the less heralded, yet culturally significant, outcomes was the sudden accessibility of the former East German landscape. For historians and archaeologists, it was like opening a time capsule. Entire regions that had been heavily restricted, often for military reasons, were now open for exploration and academic study. Among the most promising new tools for this exploration was aerial archaeology. This discipline involves flying over the landscape in a small aircraft, typically at a low altitude, and systematically photographing the ground below. It is a form of prospecting for the past, based on a simple but ingenious principle. Ancient human activity, even after millennia, leaves behind subtle but persistent traces on the surface of the earth. These traces, often completely invisible to someone standing on the ground, can become startlingly clear from an aerial perspective. One of the most common types of these indicators is known as a crop mark. A crop mark is a ghostly image of a buried archaeological feature created by the crops growing above it. When ancient people dug a deep ditch, for instance, the trench would eventually fill back in with topsoil. This refilled soil is looser, deeper, and retains more moisture and nutrients than the surrounding undisturbed earth. Consequently, the crops planted above this ancient ditch will grow taller, healthier, and stay green longer, creating a dark, linear pattern in a field of ripening grain. Conversely, if crops are growing over the buried foundations of an ancient stone or wooden wall, their root systems are restricted, stunting their growth and causing them to ripen and turn yellow earlier than the surrounding plants. This creates a pale, negative image of the buried structure. In essence, the fields of Europe are a vast, living canvas, on which the ghosts of the past sometimes choose to reveal themselves. It was with this knowledge that a small plane took to the skies over the state of Saxony-Anhalt in central Germany. This region is part of the Great North European Plain, a vast and fertile expanse known for its rich loess soil, a fine silty sediment deposited by glaciers during the last ice age. This soil is incredibly productive, and the area has been a heartland of agriculture for thousands of years. On board the survey flight was Otto Brasch, a pioneer of aerial archaeology in Germany, a man who had spent countless hours peering down from the cockpit of a plane, his eyes trained to spot the faint anomalies that betrayed the presence of a lost Roman villa, a forgotten medieval village, or perhaps something even older. As the plane soared over the flat, featureless farmland near the small, unassuming town of Gosek, the landscape below was a typical, monotonous patchwork of green and gold fields, neatly divided by roads and tree lines. It was a landscape that gave away no obvious secrets. But then, as the plane banked, allowing the low-angled sunlight to rake across the surface, Brash saw it. In the middle of an immense field of ripening winter wheat, there was a pattern. It was not a sharp geometric shape like a modern crop circle, but something far more subtle and organic. It was a faint but distinct discoloration in the sea of gold, a ghostly circular trace. He could discern two massive concentric rings, where the wheat was a slightly different color, a shade greener and lusher than the crops inside and outside the rings. It was a classic positive crop mark, the telltale sign of ancient refilled ditches. The shape was what truly electrified him. It was a near-perfect circle, a form rarely found in nature on such a grand scale. From his experience, he knew that large circular enclosures, often called roundels or Kreisgräbenlegen in German, were a known, albeit rare, type of monument from the Neolithic period, the New Stone Age. The sheer size of this apparition, estimated it to be close to the size of a football field, suggested it was a site of immense importance. He instructed the pilot to circle the field several times, and he photographed it from multiple angles, capturing the faint but undeniable evidence. He had found something. He didn't know how old it was or what its purpose had been, but he knew it was significant. The discovery was logged, the photographs were filed, and the Gosek Circle, as it would come to be known, was officially added to the growing list of Germany's hidden archaeological treasures. But for more than a decade, the discovery remained largely an academic curiosity, a tantalizing set of images in an archaeological archive. The political and economic challenges of German reunification were immense, and funding for a large-scale, speculative archaeological dig was scarce. And so, the secret of Gosek continued to sleep peacefully beneath the soil. The seasons came and went. The wheat was planted, it grew over the ghostly rings, and it was harvested, its annual cycle a silent guardian of the much older, deeper cycle that the monument had been built to track. It was not until the summer of 2002 that the time was right for the ghosts to finally give up their secrets. A multidisciplinary team of archaeologists, students, and scientists, under the joint leadership of Professor François Berthimes and Dr. Peter Biel of the Martin Luther University of Halle-Wittenberg, arrived at the Gosek field. The wheat had been harvested, leaving a vast empty expanse of stubble under the summer sky. Armed with Brash's aerial photographs and the results of modern geophysical surveys like magnetometry and ground-penetrating radar, which had confirmed the presence of significant buried anomalies, they began the painstaking process of excavation. The first step was to carefully strip away the topsoil with the mechanical excavator, a delicate operation that required scraping off just enough earth to reveal the archaeological layer without disturbing it. As the modern agricultural soil was peeled back, the team watched with a sense of mounting excitement. Just as the crop marks had promised, the dark, rich, humic outlines of the ancient ditches began to appear, emerging like a developing photograph against the lighter, yellowish-brown, undisturbed lush soil of the region. The ghostly image from the sky was now a tangible reality at their feet. The archaeologists had exposed the complete ground plan of a monumental ancient structure, and its complexity was even greater than they had anticipated. They had uncovered not one, but two massive, perfectly concentric circular ditches. The outer ditch was enormous, forming a perfect circle with a diameter of 75 meters, roughly 250 feet. It was U-shaped in profile, about 1.5 meters deep and several meters wide. The team calculated that the digging of this single ditch would have involved the removal of hundreds of cubic meters of earth. This was a colossal undertaking for a people equipped with nothing more than the most primitive of tools: digging sticks, stone adzes, and shovels fashioned from the large, sturdy shoulder blades of cattle. The sheer scale of the labor was a testament to the organizational power and unwavering commitment of its builders. Inside this great outer ditch, they found the remains of a second, smaller circular ditch, mirroring the first one with geometric precision. This double-ditch system created a formidable boundary, clearly separating the space within from the outside world. But the ditches were only the beginning. As the team began to carefully excavate the vast area inside the rings, they started to find a series of dark, circular stains in the soil. These stains were arranged in two more perfect concentric circles, situated just inside the ditches. An experienced archaeologist recognizes these stains immediately. They are post holes, the telltale footprints left behind by massive wooden posts that had rotted away in the ground over thousands of years. The ancient builders had not only dug ditches, they had erected a massive, double-ringed wooden stockade, or palisade, inside them. By analyzing the size and depth of the post holes, the archaeologists could reconstruct the palisade. Each post would have been a substantial log, perhaps 25 centimeters in diameter and standing several meters high. They would have been placed side by side, with no gaps in between, to form a towering solid wooden wall. This double palisade would have completely enclosed the central space, making it impossible for anyone outside to see what was happening within. It was a structure designed not just for enclosure but for secrecy. The team had revealed the complete architectural plan of an ancient monument of stunning complexity. A four-ring structure consisting of two ditches and two palisades, all arranged in perfect circles. The discovery of such a massive and complex structure was a monumental achievement in itself. But the most crucial question remained unanswered. Just how old was it? The answer lay in the small, precious fragments of organic material that had been preserved in the anaerobic, oxygen-free, conditions at the bottom of the ditches and post holes. As they excavated, the team carefully collected these fragments. Small pieces of charred wood from the original posts, the discarded bones of animals that had been eaten or sacrificed at the site, and tiny sherds of broken pottery. These humble artifacts were the key. They were time capsules, carrying within them the chemical signature of their age. The samples were carefully bagged, labeled, and sent off to specialized laboratories for radiocarbon dating. The entire archaeological team waited for the results with a mixture of professional curiosity and deeply personal anticipation. They knew the site was Neolithic, but the exact date would determine its true importance. When the report finally came back, the numbers it contained were almost unbelievable. The analysis of multiple samples was consistent and clear. The Göbekli Circle was constructed around 4900 BC. The date was so early that some of the team members initially thought there must have been an error in the laboratory analysis. They rechecked their data, but the conclusion was inescapable. This structure was nearly 7,000 years old. The implications of this date were staggering, sending shockwaves through the world of European prehistory. It fundamentally reordered the accepted timeline of human achievement. To put the age of the Göbekli Circle into perspective, it was constructed more than 2,000 years before the first massive sarsen stones were raised at Stonehenge in England. It was built a full 2,500 years before the Great Pyramid of Giza was even conceived by the architects of the Egyptian Old Kingdom. It predated the Minoan civilization of Crete, the Mycenaean palaces of Greece, and the very beginnings of writing in Mesopotamia. This was not the work of a familiar ancient culture, whose exploits are known from texts and legends. It was the creation of a mysterious and profoundly ancient society that thrived in the heart of Europe during the very dawn of the Neolithic Age, a period previously characterized as being far more primitive and less organized. The Göbekli Circle was, by a huge margin, the oldest monumental enclosed site ever discovered in Europe, and it was forcing archaeologists to completely reevaluate the capabilities and sophistication of these early farming communities. With the structure's incredible age and complex layout now established, the final piece of the initial puzzle was its purpose. Why would a Neolithic farming community, whose daily life was a constant struggle for survival, invest such a colossal amount of time, resources, and coordinated labor to build this massive circular enclosure? It clearly wasn't a standard village. The excavations found no evidence of permanent longhouses or domestic hearths inside. It wasn't designed as a military fortress. While the ditches and palisades were imposing, their layout and the nature of their gateways were not ideal for defense against a determined enemy. The key to its true purpose, the archaeologists began to suspect, lay not in what the structure enclosed, but in how one entered it. As they continued to meticulously trace the rings of post holes, they confirmed that the towering wooden palisades were not unbroken. There were 3 distinct gaps in the walls, 3 formal gateways that provided access to the sacred central area. One of these gates was oriented almost exactly due north, which was intriguing, as a north-south alignment is a feature of many sacred structures around the world. However, it was the other 2 gates that held the astonishing secret of the entire site. As the team plotted the exact positions of these gates on their site maps and began to work with archaeoastronomers to calculate the celestial alignments for the 5th millennium BC, a moment of pure discovery, a eureka moment, occurred. The southeastern and southwestern gateways were not randomly placed. They were positioned with breathtaking precision. An archaeoastronomer standing in the exact center of the circle in 4900 BC, looking towards the southeastern gate, would have seen the sun rise at the exact point on the horizon that marked the winter solstice, the shortest day of the year. Then, as that short day drew to a close, they could have turned and watched the setting sun disappear perfectly framed within the southwestern gateway. On any other day of the year, the sun would rise and set at different points along the horizon, its light blocked by the high wooden walls. The structure was designed to isolate a single crucial celestial event. It was a gigantic, sophisticated instrument for capturing the sun. This was the smoking gun, the undeniable, irrefutable proof of the circle's primary function. It was a solar observatory, a calendar carved into the very landscape. The Gosek circle was a machine for stopping time, for marking the critical turning point of the year when the dying sun was reborn. The accidental discovery of a faint ghostly circle in a field of wheat had led, step by methodical step, to the unearthing of one of the most important prehistoric sites in the world. It was a monumental structure, far older and more complex than anyone had dared to imagine, and it was built with a scientific and religious purpose that was both elegant and profound. The Gosek Circle was a temple to the sun and the sky, a place where the rhythms of the cosmos were brought down to earth and celebrated by its builders. The initial puzzle of the crop mark had been solved, but this solution only opened the door to a host of deeper, more compelling mysteries. Who were these ancient astronomer priests? Why was the winter solstice so critically important to them? And what secret ceremonies and powerful rituals unfolded inside this sacred, sun-aligned enclosure, deliberately hidden from the outside world by its towering wooden walls? The archaeologists had found the observatory, but the secrets of the people who prayed within it were still waiting to be revealed. The discovery that the Gosek Circle was a precisely engineered solar observatory, aligned with breathtaking accuracy to the winter solstice sun, was a monumental breakthrough. It elevated the site from a mere curiosity of the ancient world to a landmark of human intellectual achievement. This was not just a ring of ditches and posts. It was a functioning scientific instrument, a testament to the genius of its Stone Age creators. But establishing its function as an observatory was only the first step. The deeper, more compelling mystery remained. Why? Why did these early farmers, whose lives were a constant struggle for subsistence, dedicate such an immense portion of their resources, labor, and intellectual energy to building this colossal monument? The answers, slowly and carefully pieced together from the faint clues left behind in the 7,000-year-old soil, reveal a structure of profound, multi-layered significance. The Gosek Circle was not a single-purpose device. It was a fusion of the sacred and the profane, the practical and the divine. It was at once a highly sophisticated calendar essential for survival, a sacred temple that served as the stage for powerful and terrifying rituals, and a local chapter of a vast and mysterious religious tradition that once stretched across the heart of ancient Europe. On the most fundamental and practical level, the Gosek circle was a calendar, an agricultural tool of immense importance. The people who built it, members of what archaeologists have named the stroke-ornamented ware culture, were pioneers. They were part of the Great Neolithic Revolution, a transformative wave that saw humanity shift from the nomadic, uncertain life of hunting and gathering to a settled existence based on the cultivation of crops and the domestication of animals. This new agricultural lifestyle, while offering the promise of a more stable and abundant food supply, was also fraught with new anxieties. The success or failure of their entire community, their very survival, was no longer just a matter of following the migrating herds. It was now intimately and irrevocably tied to the great cyclical rhythms of the seasons. Knowing the right time to break the earth and sow their precious seeds of emmer wheat and barley, knowing the right time to harvest their crops before the first killing frosts of autumn arrive. This knowledge was the difference between a winter of plenty and a winter of starvation. For these Neolithic farmers, living without written language or mechanical clocks, the sky was the ultimate source of order and information. It was their clock, their compass, and their calendar. They would have been keen and patient observers of the heavens, noticing that the sun's daily journey across the sky was not static. Each day, it rose and set at a slightly different position along the horizon. From its lowest point in the dead of winter, it would begin a slow northward climb, arcing higher and higher in the sky each day, bringing with it the longer, warmer days of spring and summer. The summer solstice, the longest day of the year, marked the apex of this journey, the peak of the sun's power and the height of the growing season. After this point, the sun would begin its slow, inexorable descent back to the south, the days growing shorter and colder, leading to the harvest and the eventual return of winter. Within this annual cycle, the winter solstice was the moment of supreme importance and supreme anxiety. It was the shortest day and the longest night of the year, a time when the sun was at its weakest, its arc low and feeble in the sky. To the ancient mind, it would have seemed as though the sun, the very source of light, warmth, and life, was dying. It was a time of immense cosmic uncertainty. Would the sun abandon them completely? Would the world descend into an eternal winter of darkness and death? But the winter solstice was also a moment of profound hope. It was the great turning point, the day that, if the cosmic order held, the sun would be reborn, and would begin its slow but steady climb back towards the strength and glory of summer. To be able to predict and mark this precise moment was to hold the key to the year. The Gosek circle was a magnificent and highly effective piece of technology designed to do exactly that. By constructing the high, solid wooden palisades, the builders created a fixed, artificial horizon, eliminating the distractions of the natural landscape and allowing for a pure observation of the sun's movement. The two solstice gateways were not just entrances. They were precision instruments, a celestial targeting system. Imagine the scene on the morning of the winter solstice, nearly 7,000 years ago. The entire community, or perhaps just a select group of elders and priests, would have gathered in the cold pre-dawn gloom within the sacred confines of the circle. The air would be thick with anticipation and perhaps a degree of fear. They would stand in the center, their eyes fixed on the narrow opening of the southeastern gateway. As the sky in the east began to bleed with the first pale colors of dawn, a reverent silence would fall. And then, at the precise, predictable moment, the top limb of the sun would break the horizon, and its first rays would shoot through the gateway like a divine spotlight, a spear of golden light that would travel across the sacred ground to illuminate the very heart of the enclosure. This was not merely a scientific observation. It was a profound, communal religious experience. It was a moment of cosmic theater, a powerful affirmation that the gods had not abandoned them, that the sun had been reborn, and that the cycle of life would continue. Later that day, as the weak winter sun made its low journey across the sky, the community would watch it descend towards the southwestern gateway, where it would set, perfectly framed once again, before plunging the world into the longest night. This ability to predict this event gave the spiritual leaders of the community immense power and authority. They were not just farmers, they were timekeepers, the intermediaries between the earthly realm and the celestial one. The Gosek circle, therefore, was a powerful tool of social cohesion and control, a place where astronomical knowledge was transformed into religious power, reinforcing the social order and giving the community a sense of security in a dangerous and uncertain world. While the solstice alignments are the most dramatic, it is highly likely that the circle was used as a more general calendar. The movements of the moon, which are crucial for tracking shorter periods of time, were probably also monitored, perhaps using specific posts within the palisade rings as markers. Certain bright stars and constellations like the Pleiades star cluster, which in the northern hemisphere is associated with the timing of planting and harvest in many ancient cultures, could also have been tracked through the northern gateway or other calibrated points in the structure. The Gosek circle was a complete celestial toolkit, a place where the complex wisdom of the heavens was translated into the practical knowledge needed for earthly survival. But to see the Gosek circle as only a practical calendar would be to miss its deeper, more profound purpose. The sheer scale of the monument, the immense communal effort required for its construction, and especially the way its high palisades were designed to deliberately hide the interior from outside view, all point to the fact that this was a place of immense spiritual and ritual significance. It was not just an observatory. It was a temple, a sacred space set apart from the mundane world, a place where humanity could commune with the powerful and perhaps terrifying forces of the cosmos. As the archaeologists meticulously excavated the layers of soil within the circle's interior, they began to find compelling evidence of the rituals that once took place there, clues that painted a vivid picture of the spiritual life of its builders. Throughout the site, they unearthed the remains of massive bonfires. These were not the small, controlled hearths of a domestic settlement. They were huge pyres, evidenced by large areas of fire-reddened earth and thick deposits of ash and charcoal. Fire, a man-made echo of the sun, clearly played a central role in the ceremonies held at Gosek. It is easy to imagine a great solstice ceremony where, as darkness fell on the longest night of the year, massive bonfires were lit within the circle. The towering flames would have leapt into the night sky, their light and heat a powerful act of sympathetic magic, a human effort to symbolically strengthen the weakening sun, to warm its dying embers, and to help guide it on its journey back towards the light and life of spring. The flickering firelight, contained within the high walls of the palisade, would have created a dramatic, otherworldly atmosphere, a sacred space pulsating with light and shadow. The excavations also revealed a huge number of animal bones, far more than would be expected from simple domestic consumption. These bones were often found in deliberate deposits, carefully placed in pits that had been dug for a specific ritual purpose. The remains were primarily those of cattle, pigs, and sheep, the most valuable and important animals to a Neolithic farming community. The evidence points overwhelmingly towards large-scale ritual feasting and animal sacrifice. On the day of the solstice, the community's finest animals would have been led into the sacred circle. There they would have been ritually slaughtered, their blood spilling onto the sacred ground as a potent offering to the gods of the sun, the sky, or the earth. This act of sacrifice was a way of giving back to the divine forces that ensured the fertility of their herds and the bounty of their fields. Following the sacrifice, a great communal feast would have taken place. The roasting of the meat over the ritual fires would have filled the air with a rich aroma, and the sharing of this sacred meal would have been a powerful social event, a way of reaffirming the bonds of the community and partaking in the blessings of the gods. However, the archaeological evidence also hints at a far darker and more disturbing side to the rituals performed at Gosek. As they sifted through the soil, the archaeologists began to find human bones. Some of these were disarticulated and fragmented, and may have been the revered remains of powerful ancestors, perhaps brought to the circle for important ceremonies to lend their spiritual authority to the proceedings. But some of the discoveries were undeniably violent. In a pit near one of the gateways, they unearthed the skeleton of an individual who had been buried without their head. The skull was found buried nearby, but it was clear from the cut marks on the cervical vertebrae that the person had been decapitated. In other areas of the site, they found other human remains that showed signs of ritualized violence, limbs that had been deliberately broken or bodies that had been placed in strange, contorted positions. This grim evidence strongly suggests that human sacrifice was a part of the ceremonies conducted within the Gosek circle. While it is a chilling and abhorrent thought to the modern mind, the practice of human sacrifice is a well-documented feature of many ancient cultures around the world, particularly during times of great cosmic or social stress. The winter solsticia, time of deep anxiety about the death of the sun and the potential collapse of the cosmic order, would have been a prime occasion for the ultimate offering, a human life given to appease the gods and ensure the world's renewal. We can only speculate about the identity of the victims. They might have been prisoners of war captured from rival tribes, their sacrifice a demonstration of the community's power. Or, perhaps more chillingly, they could have been members of the community itself, a young person chosen for the terrible honor, or a captive from a raid. The act of sacrifice would have been a moment of supreme religious theater, a terrifying and awe-inspiring display of the power of the priests and the demands of their gods. The towering palisades then served a crucial dual purpose. They were an astronomical instrument, focusing the observer's eye on the heavens, but they were also a screen of secrecy, a barrier that concealed the sacred, and perhaps bloody, rituals that took place within from the eyes of the common people or the uninitiated. The full significance of the Gosek circle, however, only becomes clear when we zoom out and look at the broader European landscape. For many years after its discovery, it was considered a complete anomaly, a bafflingly sophisticated structure that seemed to appear out of nowhere in the heart of Neolithic Europe. But as archaeological survey techniques have become more advanced, particularly aerial photography and geophysical sensing, a revolutionary new picture has emerged. The Gosek circle is not unique. It is, in fact, simply the oldest and best preserved example of a type of monument known as a circular enclosure or roundel. In the years since the Gosek excavation, archaeologists have identified the ghostly traces of hundreds of these enclosures scattered across a vast swath of Central Europe, from Germany and Austria in the west, through the Czech Republic and Slovakia, and into Hungary in the east. They all share the same fundamental architectural DNA: one or more large circular ditches, often accompanied by internal rings of wooden palisades, and a set of formal gateways. Crucially, many of these later roundels also show clear evidence of astronomical alignments, most commonly to the solar solstices or equinoxes. This discovery is profound. It means that the Gosek circle was not the isolated creation of a single, unusually brilliant tribe. It was the genesis point, the prototype, for a vast and long-lasting cultural and religious tradition that spanned a huge geographical area and endured for thousands of years. It points to the existence of a widespread and highly organized belief system, a cult of the sun, that appears to have dominated the spiritual life of Central Europe's first farmers. These disparate communities, separated by hundreds of miles of dense forest and speaking different dialects or languages, were all united by a shared cosmology. They were building the same kind of temples, they were making the same kinds of sophisticated astronomical observations, and they were likely performing similar rituals centered on the life-giving power of the sun. The Gosek circle stands at the very beginning of this great tradition. It is the architectural atom, from which hundreds of other sacred circles descended over the next 2 millennia. The people of Gosek were the innovators, the visionaries who first conceived of this powerful fusion of science, architecture, and religion. Their ideas and their monumental designs proved to be so compelling and so spiritually satisfying that they spread across the continent, becoming a defining feature of European Neolithic culture. This implies a level of interaction, communication, and cultural exchange between these early farming communities that was previously thought impossible. It was a world connected not by roads or empires, but by the powerful currency of ideas, by a shared faith, and by a common deeply human desire to understand and participate in the grand cycles of the cosmos. Therefore, when we contemplate the Gosek Circle, we are looking at something far more significant than a single, isolated archaeological site. We are looking at the cradle of what may have been Europe's first great international religion. The purpose of this magnificent structure was threefold: a perfect synthesis of the physical and the metaphysical. It was a precise scientific instrument, a calendar that was essential for the community's physical survival in their new agricultural world. It was a dramatic and sacred stage, a temple where the great cosmic dramas of life, death, and rebirth were acted out through communal feasting, the magic of fire, and the dark and terrible rite of sacrifice, all to ensure the community's spiritual survival. And finally, it was a local node in a vast, interconnected network of belief, a sacred center that connected its people to a much wider world of shared knowledge, shared rituals, and a shared understanding of the heavens. The circle was a machine for harnessing the power of the cosmos, a place where astronomical knowledge was meticulously translated into religious authority and social order. It was a temple built not just of wood and earth, but of light and shadow, of fear and hope, and of the deep and enduring human need to find meaning in the great, silent, and eternal dance of the stars. The unearthing of the Gosek Circle and the subsequent deciphering of its astronomical and ritual purpose was a landmark achievement, a moment that peeled back the veil of deep time to offer a stunning glimpse into the world of our Stone Age ancestors. The discovery provided a tangible framework for understanding their scientific prowess, their complex spiritual beliefs, and the powerful ceremonies that bound their community together. We know what they built with a remarkable degree of certainty, and through careful inference we have a compelling idea of why they built it. But as is so often the case when we venture into the remote landscapes of human prehistory, for every question that finds a satisfactory answer, a dozen new, more profound, and perhaps unanswerable mysteries emerge from the shadows. The Gosek Circle is not just a monument to ancient achievement. It is also a monument to our own modern limitations. It is a place that guards its most essential secrets with a stoic silence that has endured for nearly 7 millennia. The final, and in many ways most captivating, part of its story is not one of scientific certainty, but of deep and resonant mystery. It is a journey into the unanswered questions that still swirl around the enigmatic people who conceived of this masterpiece, the perplexing reasons for its eventual abandonment, and its true revolutionary place in the grand, sprawling timeline of human civilization. The first, most fundamental, and most deeply personal mystery is, quite simply, who were these people? To the discipline of archaeology, they are given a functional sterile label, the stroke-ornamented ware culture or Stichbandkeramic in German. This name is not one they would have recognized. It is a modern classification based on the distinctive style of their pottery, which was often decorated with patterns of incised lines or dots, created by stroking or stabbing the wet clay with a tool before firing. This ceramic style is their most common archaeological fingerprint, the primary way we can trace their movements and settlements across the map of Central Europe. We know them through the silent, inanimate objects they left behind, their beautifully crafted but undecorated stone adzes and axes, polished to a smooth, functional sheen, the sharp flint blades they used for cutting and scraping, and the dark soil stains that mark the positions of the massive timber posts of their longhouses. From this material evidence we can construct a basic picture. We know they were among Europe's first true farmers, part of the great Neolithic wave of migration and technological innovation that was slowly but surely transforming the continent from a vast wilderness roamed by hunters and gatherers into a managed landscape of settled agricultural communities. But beyond these skeletal facts, they remain a people shrouded in an impenetrable mist. We do not know what they looked like, what color their hair or eyes were. We do not know what language they spoke, what sounds and cadences filled the air within their smoky longhouses. We do not know what stories they told their children around the communal hearth at night, what myths they used to explain the creation of the world, the rising of the sun, or the coming of death. Their own name for themselves, the word they would have used to define their tribe, their people, their identity, is lost forever. A vibration that vanished on the prehistoric wind without leaving a single echo. They are a people without a name, without a voice, defined only by the durable trash they left behind. And yet, this anonymous, supposedly simple Neolithic culture, a people armed with nothing more than stone, wood, and bone, achieved something truly extraordinary. They managed to conceive of, plan, and execute a project of immense intellectual, logistical, and social complexity. This stark contrast between their simple material culture and their sophisticated intellectual achievement gives rise to the most tantalizing question of all. How did they acquire this knowledge? The construction of the Gosek Circle was not a happy accident or a feat of brute force. It required a sophisticated, multi-generational understanding of celestial mechanics. This was not the work of a single lone genius who one day had a flash of insight while observing the sun's annual pattern. It was the culmination of centuries of patient, dedicated, and systematic observation. Generation after generation of skywatchers would have had to stand in the same spot, day after day, year after year, to mark the precise positions of the sunrise and sunset on the horizon. They would have needed to develop a system for recording this data, perhaps using a series of marker posts or notch sticks, and, most importantly, a system for transmitting this complex body of knowledge accurately from one generation to the next, likely through carefully memorized oral traditions, chants, or sacred stories. This implies the existence of a stable, highly organized society with a specialized class of individuals, priests, shamans, astronomer chiefs, or a council of elders, who were the custodians of this sacred and powerful knowledge. Furthermore, the physical realization of this astronomical knowledge required a remarkable grasp of practical mathematics and engineering. To lay out a perfect circle 75 meters in diameter on the gently rolling, uneven ground of the German plain is a non-trivial task. It requires an understanding of basic geometric principles. The builders likely created a gigantic compass, perhaps using a central stake and a long rope made of hide or plant fiber to trace the perfect circular outlines of the ditches and palisades in the soil. They had to be able to measure angles with enough accuracy to align the gateways not just in the general direction of the solstice, but to a specific point on the distant horizon. This required a level of precision that is truly astonishing for a culture without writing or standardized units of measurement. And then there was the immense physical labor involved. The archaeological team calculated that the digging of the deep, wide ditches would have involved the removal of thousands of tons of earth, the felling of hundreds of large, mature trees from the surrounding forests, the transport of these massive logs to the site, without the aid of draft animals or the wheel, and their erection into two towering concentric palisades would have required the coordinated effort of the entire community, working together for months, if not years. This was a massive public works project, a Neolithic equivalent of building a cathedral. It would have demanded charismatic leadership, meticulous planning, a clear division of labor, and above all a powerful unifying social or religious motivation that could compel hundreds of people to contribute their labor to a project from which they might not even see the final completion. How did a society that we characterize as Stone Age orchestrate such a complex undertaking? The Gosek Circle stands in silent, magnificent defiance of our modern tendency to underestimate the intellectual and social capabilities of our most distant ancestors. It suggests a level of scientific acumen and social organization that we are only just beginning to appreciate, leaving us to wonder what other great feats of intellect, art, and engineering they accomplished that have since been lost to time, their traces completely erased from the archaeological record. The second great mystery that emanates from the Göbekli Circle is as perplexing as the story of its creation, the mystery of its abandonment. The archaeological evidence, based on the stratification of the soil and the dating of artifacts found at different levels, suggests that the site was in continuous and active use for a period of about 200 years. This is a significant span of time, representing somewhere between 8 and 10 generations of people. For 2 centuries, the Göbekli Circle was the undeniable ritual heart of its community. The great solstice ceremonies were performed here, the fires were lit, the communal feasts were held, and the solemn sacrifices were made. It was a place of immense power, the central axis around which their spiritual and agricultural world revolved. And then, for reasons we may never fully understand, it stopped. The site appears to have been deliberately and peacefully abandoned. The archaeological record is notable for what it lacks. There are no signs of a violent end. There is no thick layer of ash and charcoal that would indicate a destructive fire, no evidence of the palisades being torn down or the ditches being deliberately filled in as an act of desecration. There are no caches of foreign weapons or skeletons showing the signs of battle that would point to a conquest by a rival tribe. It seems the people who had invested so much in its creation, the descendants of the original builders, simply walked away, leaving their great temple to the slow, silent processes of natural decay. Why would a community abandon its most sacred site, the very center of its cosmic and spiritual universe? Archaeologists have proposed several compelling, though ultimately unprovable, theories. One of the most persuasive is the idea that the belief system itself evolved and changed. Religion and ritual are never static. They are constantly adapting and transforming. After 2 centuries, it is entirely possible that new ideas, new gods, or new religious practices emerged, perhaps migrating from a neighboring culture or arising organically from within the community itself. The old ways, centered so intensely on the observation of the sun and the sky, may have gradually lost their spiritual potency or relevance. A new cult, perhaps focused on ancestor worship, fertility goddesses, or chthonic underworld deities, might have risen to prominence. In this case, the Göbekli Circle, a magnificent monument to that older superseded faith, would have been respectfully decommissioned, its power allowed to fade as the community turned its spiritual attention to new rituals and new sacred spaces. We may be seeing the archaeological footprint of a major, peaceful spiritual revolution. Another intriguing and plausible theory is linked to environmental and climate change. The early Neolithic period was a time of significant climatic fluctuation. We know from paleoclimatological data that there were periods of increased rainfall and cloud cover. Imagine a prolonged period, perhaps lasting a decade or more, of consistently cloudy, overcast winters. The entire purpose and power of the Göbekli Circle was predicated on a clear view of the winter solstice sunrise and sunset. If, for several years in a row, the gathered community and their priests stared at the southeastern gateway only to be met with a uniform gray sky, the central miracle of the site would fail to occur. The priest's ability to command or predict the sun's rebirth would be called into serious question. A repeated failure of the primary ritual could have been interpreted as a sign that the gods were angry, that the sun had withdrawn its favor, or that the priests themselves had lost their sacred connection. This could have triggered a profound crisis of faith, leading the community to conclude that the site had lost its power, forcing them to abandon it in search of a new way to propitiate their silent gods. A third possibility is rooted in more mundane, but equally powerful ecological pressures. The first farmers practiced a form of agriculture known as slash-and-burn or swidden agriculture. They would clear a patch of forest, farm it intensively for a number of years, and then once the soil's natural fertility was exhausted, they would move on to a new patch. After 2 centuries of continuous settlement and farming in the area around Gosek, it is highly likely that the soil had become depleted and that the surrounding forests had been stripped of their useful timber. Declining crop yields and a scarcity of resources could have forced the entire community to migrate, to pack up and move several miles away to a new, more fertile area. If the people moved, their ceremonial center, no matter how sacred, would have been left behind, too far away to be of practical use. In this scenario, the abandonment was not a crisis of faith, but a simple act of pragmatic relocation. Whatever the true Ryasona change in religion, a shift in the climate, or the simple exhaustion of the land, the abandonment of the Gosek Circle is a poignant and powerful reminder that even the most sacred and monumental centers of human culture are not permanent. The great wooden posts, no longer maintained, eventually rotted at their base and fell. The deep ditches, no longer cleared, slowly and inexorably filled with wind-blown soil and decaying leaves. The great temple of the sun was gradually, gently reclaimed by the earth, its form softening, its memory fading from human consciousness, until it became nothing more than a ghostly, almost invisible circle in a field of German wheat. The secret of its desertion is one it has guarded for nearly 7,000 years. The final and perhaps most significant aspect of the Gosek Circle's story is the revolutionary impact its discovery has had on our modern understanding of the deep past. It has acted as a powerful corrective, forcing a fundamental rewrite of the accepted timeline of European civilization. Before the excavation and dating of Gosek, the grand narrative of ancient Europe was largely centered on the great megalithic, Great Stone cultures of the Atlantic West, particularly those in Britain, Ireland, and Brittany. Stonehenge, with its massive iconic standing stones and its sophisticated astronomical alignments, was widely regarded as the pinnacle of prehistoric European genius, the awe-inspiring dawn of monumental architecture and applied science on the continent. The truly ancient civilizations, the ones that were seen as the wellsprings of all later Western culture, were thought to be those of the Near East, Egypt, with its pyramids and hieroglyphs, and Mesopotamia, with its cities and the invention of writing. In this older, well-established view, Central Europe was often considered a relative backwater, a quiet, forested region of simple farmers who were slow to adopt the great innovations coming from the more dynamic centers in the south and west. The Gosek Circle, with its astonishing age and its undeniable sophistication, shatters this outdated and simplistic model. It proves, in the most dramatic way possible, that this view is fundamentally wrong. Here, in the fertile heart of Germany, a complex, monumental, and precisely astronomically aligned structure was conceived and built a full 2,000 years before the first phase of construction began at Stonehenge. It predates the Great Pyramid of Giza by more than 2.5 millennia. This single undeniable fact forces a radical reorientation of our historical map. It demonstrates that the origins of monumental architecture, large-scale organized religion, and sophisticated observational science in Europe do not lie exclusively in the West. They arose independently and far earlier in the very center of the continent. The people of the stroke-ornamented where culture were not followers, waiting for ideas to diffuse from elsewhere. They were brilliant innovators. They were the pioneers of a powerful tradition of building sacred circular enclosures that would become a defining feature of the European landscape for the next 2,000 years. Gosek is the archetype, the original blueprint, from which later, more famous sites like Stonehenge may have ultimately drawn their distant architectural and cosmological inspiration. This discovery compels us to rethink the very nature of the Neolithic world. It was not a primitive, static, and disconnected landscape of isolated, inward-looking tribes. It was a world of surprising dynamism, a world of ideas, of travel, and of far-reaching cultural influence. The architectural and astronomical concepts that were first given monumental form at Gosek were so powerful, so spiritually satisfying, that they spread across the continent, adapted and reinterpreted by different cultures, but retaining their core features. This paints a picture of a Stone Age Europe that was intellectually vibrant and connected by vast networks of trade, communication, and shared faith in ways we had never before imagined. The Gosek Circle, then, stands as a silent but eloquent rebuke to our ingrained chronological snobbery, our tendency to view the past as a simple linear progression from primitive to advanced. It is a powerful testament to the forgotten genius of our most distant ancestors. It reminds us that great intellectual and spiritual achievements can arise in the most unexpected times and places, and that the story of civilization is far more complex and multi-centered than we have traditionally believed. As we stand today before the reconstructed wooden posts of the Gosek Circle, which have been erected in the original post holes, we are left with a profound and humbling sense of awe. We are looking at the oldest known star temple in Europe, a sacred place conceived and built by a people we can never truly know, a people without a name. But in its perfect circular form and its precise, unwavering alignment to the winter sun, they left behind an enduring and universal message, a message that speaks clearly across 7 millennia of the fundamental human quest to find order, meaning, and our own place within the grand, silent, and eternal dance of the cosmos. It leaves us to wonder, with a thrill of profound anticipation, how many more of these incredible secrets, how many more of these lost intellectual worlds, still lie sleeping, waiting for a chance discovery to reveal them, just beneath the surface of the earth. The Gosek Circle stands as a powerful testament to the forgotten genius of our ancient ancestors. It is more than just wood and earth. It is a bridge to a time when the sky was a sacred clock and the sun a powerful deity. The secrets of its builders may be lost to time, but their legacy reminds us that history is always deeper than we know. In the heart of Sri Lanka rises a strange, circular mountain known to locals as Alien Mountain. For centuries, it was considered a sacred place, but recent discoveries have revealed a deeper mystery. Carved onto its rocks are enigmatic symbols and charts that don't match any known language. Some researchers believe these are not just art, but ancient maps of the stars. In the heart of Sri Lanka, nestled within the dense, humid jungles of the north-central province, there lies a geological anomaly so strange, so perfectly formed, that it seems to defy the chaotic processes of nature. It is a place that has captivated the human imagination for millennia, a landmark steeped in a rich tapestry of folklore, sacred history, and deep, unsolved mysteries. This place is known as Danigala. To the local people who live in its shadow, it is a place of reverence and power, but it also carries a more evocative modern nickname, Alien Mountain. This name was not given lightly. It arises from the mountain's utterly unique and almost artificial appearance. While the surrounding landscape is characterized by rolling plains and jagged, irregular mountain ranges, Danigala rises abruptly from the jungle floor as a massive, almost perfectly circular, and distinctly flat-topped rock formation. It looks less like a mountain that was pushed up from the earth, and more like a colossal stone disk that was placed there by a giant, or perhaps otherworldly hand. Its symmetrical shape and isolated position make it a natural focal point, a place that seems to call out to be noticed, to be explored, and to be venerated. The very geology of Danigala is the first layer of its enigma. It is a type of geological formation known as an Inselberg, or an isolated rock hill that has risen dramatically from a level plain. But its remarkable circularity and flat summit are what set it apart. From the air, it resembles a giant stony platform, an immense natural altar exposed to the sky. This unique shape has inevitably made it a nexus for myths and legends. For generations, local villagers have passed down stories that connect the mountain to celestial events and powerful beings. Some legends say it was a landing site for ancient flying machines, or vimanas, described in Hindu and Buddhist texts. Others whisper that its flat top was the stage used by gods and demons in their cosmic battles. The name Alien Mountain is simply the modern translation of these ancient, deep-seated beliefs that this place has a profound connection to the sky. It is a place where the boundary between the earthly and the celestial feels unusually thin. As one approaches the base of the mountain, the sense of mystery deepens. The journey itself is an immersion into a wild and ancient world. The path winds through a dense jungle teeming with life, the air thick with the scent of damp earth and tropical blossoms, the silence punctuated by the calls of exotic birds and the chattering of monkeys. The mountain itself is not an easy climb. Its steep, rocky slopes are a challenge, but for those who make the ascent, it offers a reward beyond the breathtaking panoramic view from its summit. Hidden within the rocky flanks of Danigala is a vast and ancient cave system, a place that has served as a sanctuary for human beings for thousands of years. This is the second layer of its mystery, the Cave of the Kings and Queens. This is not a single small cave, but a sprawling network of rock shelters and larger caverns. The main cave is immense, a great, yawning mouth in the side of the mountain that is large enough to shelter hundreds of people. The air inside is cool and still, a welcome respite from the humid jungle heat. The walls are stained dark by the smoke of countless fires lit over thousands of years. Archaeological excavations conducted within these caves have revealed a long and continuous history of human occupation. In the deepest layers of the cave floor, archaeologists have unearthed stone tools, pottery fragments, and animal bones that date back to Sri Lanka's prehistoric Mesolithic period. This is proof that the very first inhabitants of this region, ancient hunter-gatherers, recognized the unique protective qualities of this mountain and made it their home. They lived and died within these walls, long before the rise of kingdoms or the arrival of Buddhism. Later in its history, as civilization evolved, the caves took on a new, more spiritual purpose. With the arrival of Buddhism in Sri Lanka around the 3rd century BC, the Danigala caves were transformed into a monastery for ascetic monks. These monks, seeking silence, solitude, and a place to meditate far from the distractions of the world, found a perfect sanctuary in the mountain's embrace. Evidence of their presence is still visible today. On the rock faces around the cave entrances, one can find faint but discernible inscriptions written in the ancient Brahmi script, the earliest form of writing found in Sri Lanka. These inscriptions are typically donative, recording that a particular cave was prepared and donated to the Sangha, the community of Buddhist monks, by a local chieftain or noble. This tells us that by the early historic period, Danigala was not just a wild place, but a recognized center of religious importance, a place worthy of patronage by the elite. Local folklore embroiders this known history with even grander tales. Legends speak of a great king of ancient Sri Lanka using the caves as a hidden military command center during a war. Other stories claim that a powerful queen, seeking refuge, hid a fabulous treasure somewhere within the labyrinthine depths of the cave system, a treasure that is still waiting to be found. These tales of kings, queens, and sages have cemented the mountain's status as a place of immense cultural and historical significance. It is a living landmark, a place where the lines between history, myth, and sacred geography blur into one. For centuries, this rich history and the mountain's unique shape were thought to be the extent of its mysteries. But a more careful and recent examination of the site has revealed a third, and by far the most enigmatic layer of its story. This discovery was not made deep within the caves, or by deciphering the known Brahmi inscriptions. It was found out in the open, on the exposed rock surfaces of the mountain itself, particularly on the flat summit and on the large boulders that litter its slopes. Here, etched into the hard stone, archaeologists and researchers have found hundreds of petroglyphs. Petroglyphs are images created by removing part of a rock surface by incising, picking, carving, or abrading. They are a universal form of prehistoric art, a way for ancient people to leave a permanent mark on their landscape. But the petroglyphs of Danigala are unlike any others found in Sri Lanka. And this is the heart of the true mystery. The first thing that strikes any observer is the nature of the carvings themselves. They are not the familiar, easily recognizable depictions of animals, hunting scenes, or human figures that one often finds at prehistoric rock art sites. The daniglyphs, as they are sometimes called, are almost entirely abstract and geometric. The dominant motifs are circles within circles, circles connected by lines, and fields of small, dot-like cupules arranged in intricate patterns. There are strange, radiating lines, complex grids, and enigmatic symbols that do not seem to represent anything in the natural world. There are some stylized humanoid figures, but they are rendered in a stark stick-like fashion, their limbs contorted into strange ritualistic postures. The overall impression is not of art meant to depict the world, but of a system of symbols meant to convey complex information, a form of communication, a code. This leads to the fourth and most profound layer of the enigma. The Danigala carvings constitute a language that no one can read. While Sri Lanka has a rich epigraphic history, with thousands of inscriptions in ancient scripts like Brahmi and later forms of Sinhalese, the symbols at Danigala do not correspond to any of these known writing systems. They are not letters. They are not syllables. They seem to be a completely unique, standalone symbolic system, a graphic language whose key has been lost for thousands of years. This makes them incredibly frustrating for historians and linguists. The Brahmi inscriptions in the caves can be translated. They tell us who donated the cave and why. But the petroglyphs, which are believed to be far older, remain stubbornly silent. They are a message from a lost world, written in a forgotten tongue. The sheer number and density of the carvings are also staggering. The flat summit of Alien Mountain is like a great, open-air blackboard, covered in these strange diagrams. This was not the work of a single individual doodling on a rock. This was a sustained communal effort, a project that likely took generations to complete. The act of carving into the hard quartzite rock of the mountain would have required immense effort and specialized stone tools. The creation of each symbol was a deliberate and labor-intensive act. The people who made them were clearly driven by a powerful and enduring motivation. They were recording something they believed to be of the utmost importance, something they wanted to preserve for eternity. So what was this important information? What is the message locked within these strange, silent symbols? The abstract, geometric nature of the carvings, particularly the numerous circular diagrams filled with dots, has led a number of prominent researchers, including the former Director General of Archaeology in Sri Lanka, Dr. Sirandaraniyagala, to propose a radical and compelling theory. He has suggested that these are not just random patterns or decorative art. They are maps. And given their location on a mountaintop with a clear 360-degree view of the heavens, they are most likely maps of the night sky. The theory posits that the people of Danigala were sophisticated ancient astronomers, and that they used the surface of their sacred mountain to create a permanent record of their celestial observations. In this interpretation, the large circles could represent the horizon or a portion of the celestial sphere, and the smaller dots and circles within them could represent individual stars or entire constellations. This hypothesis, if correct, transforms the entire site. It means that Danigala was not just a place of myth and legend, not just a shelter for monks, but a functioning scientific observatory, a center of astronomical knowledge that predates the arrival of Buddhism and the dawn of written history in Sri Lanka. It suggests the existence of a lost scientific tradition, a deep well of knowledge about the movements of the stars, the sun, and the moon. The silent, unreadable language of the petroglyphs might not be a language of words at all, but a language of positions, a graphic representation of the cosmic order. The enigma of Alien Mountain, therefore, is not just about its strange shape or its legendary caves. It is about these mysterious charts etched in stone, a puzzle that invites us to look up from the rock and towards the sky, to try and see the heavens through the eyes of a forgotten people, and to decode a celestial message that has waited for thousands of years to be understood. The mysterious petroglyphs of Danigala Mountain, etched into the hard rock like a message from a lost world, present a profound challenge to modern researchers. Their abstract, geometric nature and their lack of connection to any known script mean that traditional methods of translation are useless. To decipher their meaning, one cannot look in a dictionary. One must look for patterns, for context, and for a logic that transcends written language. It is this search for an underlying logic that has led a growing number of archaeologists and archaeoastronomers to a compelling and increasingly plausible conclusion: that the key to understanding the Danny-Gala carvings is not to be found on the earth, but in the sky. The theory gaining traction is that this sacred mountain is covered not in random doodles or forgotten symbols, but in a series of sophisticated celestial charts, ancient maps of the stars, and a record of cosmic events. Decoding these celestial charts is a complex process of astronomical analysis, pattern recognition, and a degree of educated speculation, a process that is slowly beginning to reveal the secrets of a remarkably advanced astronomical tradition in ancient Sri Lanka. The most prominent and visually striking carvings on Danny-Gala are the large, complex circular diagrams. These are not simple circles but intricate compositions, often featuring a large outer ring that encloses a carefully arranged pattern of smaller circles, dots or cupules, and connecting lines. For years, these were dismissed as generic sun symbols or mandalas, common motifs in many ancient cultures. But a closer and more scientific examination suggests a far more specific purpose. The theory, championed by notable Sri Lankan archaeologists like Dr. Sirandaraniagala, proposes that these circular diagrams are, in fact, primitive maps of the night sky or planispheres. In this interpretation, the large outer circle might represent a specific portion of the celestial sphere or perhaps the view of the sky as seen from the mountaintop. The smaller dots and circles within would then represent individual bright stars or, more likely, entire star clusters and constellations. This is a powerful idea because it provides a potential key to the entire symbolic system. If the dots represent stars, then their arrangement should, in theory, correspond to the actual arrangement of stars in the night sky. Researchers have begun the painstaking process of trying to match the patterns within the Danny-Gala circles to known constellations. It's a challenging task as these are not precise to scale star charts like we would create today. They are stylized, schematic representations, reflecting what was important to the ancient observer, not necessarily a perfect scientific rendering. However, some tantalizing potential matches have been proposed. Certain dense clusters of dots in the carvings bear a strong resemblance to prominent star clusters like the Pleiades or the Hyades, two groups of stars that are easily visible to the naked eye and have been used by cultures all over the world to mark seasons and guide navigation for thousands of years. The very act of creating these charts suggests a high level of astronomical dedication. It implies that the ancient people of Danny-Gala were not just casual observers of the night sky. They were systematically mapping it, identifying and grouping stars into constellations, and then transferring that celestial knowledge onto the permanent medium of stone. They were creating a star atlas, a durable record of their cosmic landscape. These charts would have served as a repository of knowledge, a way to teach younger generations how to identify the key constellations and understand their movements. They were, in essence, the textbooks of a Stone Age astronomy class, written not in letters, but in the universal language of stellar patterns. Among the abstract diagrams and circles, the artists of Danny-Gala also carved a number of stylized humanoid figures. These figures are stark and minimalistic, often little more than stick figures, but they are rendered with a strange, dynamic energy. They are frequently shown with their arms raised, their legs bent as if in motion, and their bodies depicted in a way that is distinctly non-human. For a long time, these were interpreted as depictions of shamans, dancers, or mythical sky beings. But when viewed through an astronomical lens, a new and compelling theory emerges. A number of researchers have noted a striking resemblance between the posture and form of these humanoid figures and the shape of one of the most famous and recognizable constellations in the entire night sky, Orion. Orion, often called the Hunter, is a massive constellation that dominates the winter sky in the northern hemisphere and is clearly visible from Sri Lanka. Its most distinctive feature is Orion's belt, a short, straight line of 3 bright stars. Above the belt is the star Betelgeuse, marking one shoulder, and below it is the star Rigel, marking a knee or foot. The entire constellation, when its main stars are connected, strongly resembles a human figure with a narrow waist, the belt, broad shoulders, and outstretched limbs. The strange stick-like figures carved on Danigala Mountain, with their narrow waists and raised arms, are a surprisingly good match for a schematic representation of the Orion constellation. If this Orion correlation is correct, it is a discovery of immense significance. The worship or veneration of Orion is a common thread that runs through countless ancient mythologies across the globe. The ancient Egyptians associated Orion with the god Osiris, a central figure in their religion of death and rebirth. The ancient Greeks saw him as a great hunter placed in the stars. Indigenous cultures in the Americas, Africa, and Australia all have their own powerful myths associated with this same group of stars. The potential depiction of Orion at Danigala would suggest that the ancient inhabitants of Sri Lanka were part of this global human tradition of seeing a great, powerful figure in the night sky. It would imply that their mythology and religion were deeply tied to the movements of this specific constellation. The humanoid figures would not just be art. They would be sacred icons, depictions of a sky god or a celestial ancestor who played a central role in their worldview. The astronomical significance of Danigala may not be limited to just mapping the stars. The physical placement of the carvings on the mountain and the orientation of the mountain itself suggests that the entire site may have functioned as a massive, landscape-scale observatory, similar in principle to sites like Stonehenge or the Goseck Circle. Researchers are currently investigating the possibility of deliberate alignments between the petroglyphs and key celestial events. This involves carefully surveying the exact position and orientation of specific carvings, and then using computer software to model the ancient sky as it would have appeared thousands of years ago, accounting for the slow shift in the Earth's axis known as precession. The goal is to see if any of the carvings act as markers for important solar, lunar, or stellar events. For example, could a specific line or symbol on the eastern side of the summit align with the exact position of the sunrise on the winter or summer solstice? Marking the solstices, the shortest and longest days of the year, was a primary function of most ancient observatories, as it was crucial for creating a reliable calendar for agriculture and ritual. Similarly, alignments to the equinoxes, the days of equal light and darkness, are also being explored. Beyond the sun, researchers are looking for potential alignments to the rising or setting of particularly bright and important stars. A star like Sirius, the brightest star in the night sky, was revered by many ancient cultures, most famously the Egyptians, who used its annual appearance to predict the flooding of the Nile. It is plausible that some of the carvings at Danigala were designed to point to the rising of Sirius or another significant star, using the natural horizon as a foresight. If these alignments can be proven, it would elevate Danigala from a place where the stars were merely depicted to a place where their movements were actively tracked and predicted. It would be a true functioning star temple. Adding another layer of intrigue and fueling more speculative theories is one particularly strange and complex panel of carvings. This panel does not appear to be a map of the sky, but a map of the Earth. It seems to show a topographical representation of the area around Danigala itself. A large circle at the center of the panel is thought to represent the circular summit of Alien Mountain. Radiating out from this central circle are a series of lines that appear to correspond to the rivers and streams that flow through the surrounding plains. Some researchers have identified specific confluences and bends in the lines that seem to match the local geography with surprising accuracy. Most mysteriously, several of these lines on the map seem to converge on the flat top of the mountain symbol. The interpretation of this map rock is highly debated. Mainstream archaeologists suggest it could be a highly stylized map of the local territory, perhaps marking important resources, sacred sites, or the boundaries of the community's land. It could have been a tool for teaching geography to the young or for planning hunting expeditions. However, the map's focus on the mountaintop as a convergence point has captured the imagination of more fringe authors and proponents of ancient astronaut theories. They interpret the map not as a simple chart of the landscape, but as a depiction of a significant event. They see the lines converging on the summit as flight paths, and they argue that the entire carving is a representation of a landing site. In this view, the mountain's nickname, Alien Mountain, is not just a modern fancy, but a reflection of an ancient, preserved memory of a celestial or even extraterrestrial event that took place on its summit. While this landing site theory lies far outside the realm of conventional archaeology, it highlights the profound sense of mystery that the Danigala carvings evoke. They are a Rorschach test of stone, a set of symbols so enigmatic that they can accommodate multiple and often conflicting interpretations. But whether one sees a practical star chart, a sacred depiction of a sky god, or a map of an ancient landing, the underlying conclusion is the same. The people who created these petroglyphs were not primitive artists idly scratching on rocks. They were a people with a deep and complex relationship with their environment, both terrestrial and celestial. The process of decoding these strange and beautiful charts is a journey into the mind of the ancient Sri Lankan astronomer. It is a process that reveals a lost world of science, myth, and ritual, where the mountain was an altar, the sky was a temple, and the stars themselves were a sacred text waiting to be read. The compelling evidence that the petroglyphs of Danigala Mountain are a form of ancient astronomical record, a collection of star maps, celestial alignments, and sacred diagrams, naturally leads to the next great, and perhaps most human question. Who were the people who carved them? A monument of such intellectual and physical effort does not arise in a vacuum. It is the product of a specific culture, a society with the stability, the motivation, and the sophisticated worldview necessary to undertake such a monumental project. While the stones themselves remain silent about the names and stories of their creators, a careful examination of the archaeological record of Sri Lanka, combined with an understanding of ancient religious practices, allows us to begin painting a portrait of these mysterious stargazers. The story of the people who carved the stars is a journey deep into Sri Lanka's prehistory, exploring the island's very first inhabitants, the powerful pre-Buddhist belief systems they likely practiced, and the immense challenge of assigning a definite age to their incredible achievements. The search for the identity of Danigala's creators begins in the deepest layers of the archaeological record, long before the dawn of recorded history. The oldest anatomically modern human remains found in Sri Lanka, and indeed in all of South Asia, belong to a people archaeologists have named Balangoda man. This is not the name of a single individual, but a label for a highly successful Mesolithic, Middle Stone Age, hunter-gatherer culture that inhabited the island for an astonishingly long period, with evidence of their presence dating back as far as 30,000 years ago, and continuing up until the arrival of agriculture and iron technology around 1000 BC. The caves at Danigala itself, along with other famous cave sites like Fa Hien and Batadambalina, have yielded the skeletal remains and tools of Balangoda man, confirming that they were present and thriving in this very region. These were a physically robust people, well adapted to the challenging jungle environment. They were expert hunters using small geometric quartz tools known as microliths to create effective projectiles for hunting game. They were also skilled foragers, gathering edible plants, nuts, and honey from the forest. They lived in small mobile groups, using rock shelters and caves like the ones at Danigala as their base camps. For thousands of years, they were the undisputed masters of the island. Given this deep and ancient presence, it is highly possible, and indeed very likely, that the first and oldest petroglyphs at Danigala were carved by the hands of Balangoda man. This is a profound thought. It would mean that the astronomical traditions at Danigala are not just a few thousand years old, but could have roots stretching back deep into the Stone Age. It suggests that these hunter-gatherer societies were not just focused on the immediate, earthly concerns of finding food and shelter. They were also looking up. They were observing the sky, tracking the movements of the sun, moon, and stars, and developing a complex cosmologia map of the universe and their place within it. The act of carving these celestial maps onto the rock of their sacred mountain would have been a way of making that cosmology permanent, of fixing their understanding of the heavens into the very fabric of their homeland. This would place the intellectual achievements of Balangota man on par with other prehistoric cultures around the world, who are known to have developed sophisticated astronomical knowledge, fundamentally challenging the old-fashioned view of hunter-gatherers as being intellectually primitive. The first artists of Danigala may have been the very first scientists of Sri Lanka. The astronomical nature of the symbols at Danigala provides our most significant clue about the spiritual life of these ancient people. The symbols strongly suggest the existence of a sophisticated and powerful pre-Buddhist religion in ancient Sri Lanka, a belief system that was deeply connected to the observation of the sky. Before the arrival of Buddhism in the 3rd century BC, which introduced a new philosophy and a new pantheon of figures, the island would have been home to a variety of indigenous animistic and shamanistic beliefs. The evidence at Danigala suggests that a major component of this early religion was a form of astral worship. This sky religion was likely centered on the veneration of the great celestial bodies, the sun as the source of light, warmth, and life, the moon with its mysterious cycles that governed the tides and the passage of shorter periods of time, and the stars which formed a vast, predictable, and eternal map in the heavens. For these ancient people, the sky was not an empty void. It was a living divine realm, populated by gods, spirits, and ancestors. The movements of the celestial bodies were not just random mechanical processes. They were the actions of these powerful beings, events that had a direct and profound impact on life on Earth. A solar eclipse, a meteor shower, or the appearance of a comet would have been interpreted as powerful omens, messages from the gods that needed to be understood and responded to. In this worldview, a place like Danigala Mountain would have been the perfect natural temple. Its isolated position and its flat, elevated summit, which provided an unobstructed, 360-degree view of the horizon and the celestial dome, made it a natural observatory. It was a place that was physically closer to the sky, a sacred high place where the boundary between the earthly and the divine was thin. Here, the priests or shamans of the community could perform their observations, tracking the movements of their celestial deities and interpreting their meaning for the community. The mountain itself would have become a powerful axis mundi, a cosmic pillar connecting the earth to the heavens. The carvings then were the sacred texts of this religion, the scriptures of a faith written not in words, but in the divine geometry of the cosmos. This understanding of Danigala as a center for a pre-Buddhist sky religion allows us to speculate about the nature of the rituals that would have taken place there. The petroglyphs were likely far more than just static scientific records or decorative art. They were almost certainly active components in religious ceremonies and shamanic practices. The very act of carving the symbols into the hard rock would have been a ritual in itself. It was a laborious and time-consuming process, and this effort would have imbued the act with a deep spiritual significance. As a shaman or priest chipped away at the stone, they were not just creating an image, they were channeling celestial power, bringing the divine map of the heavens down to earth and fixing it in place, perhaps to honor a sky god or to ensure the continued stability of the cosmic order. The charts and diagrams would have then been used as focal points for communal ceremonies. It is easy to imagine the community gathering on the summit of Danigala on significant celestial dates, such as the solstices or equinoxes. A priest might have used the carved star maps to point out the constellations to the gathered people, recounting the sacred myths and stories associated with them. The humanoid figures representing Orion or other sky beings would have been treated as sacred icons, perhaps receiving offerings of flowers, food, or incense. The carvings could have been used to time these important ceremonies and community gatherings, ensuring that the rituals on Earth were performed in perfect harmony with the events happening in the heavens. Furthermore, the site likely played a role in shamanic practices. Shamanism, a spiritual practice found in many hunter-gatherer and early agricultural societies, often involves the shaman entering an altered state of consciousness to journey to the spirit world. The goal of these journeys is often to communicate with spirits, heal the sick, or seek guidance for the community. The strange, abstract symbols and the contorted postures of the humanoid figures at Danigala are very similar to the types of visionary art created by shamanic cultures around the world, which are often said to be depictions of what the shaman sees during their trance state. It is possible that the shamans of Danigala used the mountain as their ritual space, entering a trance through chanting, drumming, or the use of psychoactive plants, and then carving their visions, their journeys through the spirit world and the cosmos, onto the rock as a permanent record. The star maps in this context would be both a guide for their spiritual journey and a map of the otherworldly realms they explored. While this rich picture of a prehistoric sky religion is compelling, it is shadowed by one of the greatest challenges in the study of rock art, the question of dating. Accurately determining the age of the Danigala petroglyphs is incredibly difficult. Unlike organic materials like bone or charcoal, which can be directly dated using the radiocarbon method, there is no reliable technique for directly dating the carvings on a rock surface. The stone itself is millions of years old, and the act of carving leaves no chemical signature that can be easily measured. As a result, archaeologists must rely on a series of indirect methods, each with its own limitations, leaving the exact age of the carvings and, by extension, the definitive identity of their creators frustratingly open to debate. One common method is to analyze the style of the carvings and compare them to other, datable forms of art. However, as we have seen, the Danigala symbols are unique, with no clear parallels to the pottery decorations or other art forms of the Balangota people or later cultures. This makes stylistic dating highly speculative. Another method is to study the degree of weathering or erosion of the carvings. The idea is that older carvings will be more worn down by wind and rain than younger ones. While this can provide a relative timeline, i.e., this carving looks older than that one, it cannot provide an absolute date in years, as the rate of erosion depends on too many variable factors, such as the type of rock and its degree of exposure to the elements. The most promising scientific method is to try and date the soil layers or other deposits that have formed over the top of the petroglyphs. If a carving is found buried beneath a layer of soil that contains charcoal or other organic material, that material can be radiocarbon dated. This will not give the exact date of the carving, but it will provide a terminus antiquem, a Latin term meaning the date before which it must have been made. For example, if a carving is covered by a soil layer dated to 3000 BC, we know the carving must be older than that. Archaeologists have been working to apply this technique at Danigala, but it is a slow process that can only be used on carvings that have been naturally buried over time. Many of the most impressive carvings remain exposed on the summit, with no soil covering to date. This dating uncertainty means that we cannot definitively say that all the carvings were made by one culture at one time. It is highly probable that the site was used and added to over a very long period. The oldest, most weathered carvings may indeed be the work of the Mesolithic Balangota people. Later, as new groups of people with agricultural knowledge migrated to the island, they may have recognized the sacred power of the mountain and added their own carvings, perhaps modifying or reinterpreting the older symbols. This process could have continued for thousands of years, with each new generation adding its own layer of meaning and knowledge to the sacred rock face. Danigala may not be a single book written by one author, but a great library, with each carving a page written by a different hand in a different millennium. In the end, the identity of the people who carved the stars on Danigala Mountain remains a tantalizing puzzle. The strongest evidence points to the island's most ancient inhabitants, the Balangota people, as the originators of this incredible tradition. Their motivations were likely a complex blend of the practical and the spiritual. They were scientists creating a calendar to ensure their survival. They were priests, performing rituals to honor their celestial gods. And they were shamans, mapping their journeys into the spirit world. The mountain was their temple, their observatory, and their canvas. While we may never know their names or hear their stories in their own words, they left behind an intellectual and spiritual legacy that is as enduring as the stone into which it is carved. They were a people who looked to the heavens for answers, and in doing so, they left us with a set of profound and beautiful questions that continue to inspire and challenge us today. The enigma of Danigala Mountain, with its strange circular form and its rock faces covered in a silent cosmic language, is a profound mystery in its own right. It stands as a powerful testament to a lost world of science and spirituality in ancient Sri Lanka. But to truly appreciate its significance, we must lift our gaze from the island itself and look at the wider world. When we place Danigala within the global context of ancient mysteries and prehistoric astronomy, it ceases to be an isolated anomaly. Instead, it becomes a crucial and fascinating piece of a much larger puzzle, a puzzle that hints at universal human impulses, shared ancient mythologies, and perhaps even a lost global network of sacred knowledge. The final chapter of Danigala's story is one that connects it to other enigmatic sites across the planet, transforming it from a local curiosity into a site of global importance, and leaving us with a legacy of questions that resonate with some of the deepest mysteries of the human past. The first and most compelling connection is the striking similarity between the petroglyphs at Danigala and other ancient rock art, found in completely different parts of the world, all believed to be prehistoric star maps. For a long time, it was assumed that ancient people's interest in the sky was rudimentary, limited to simple sun and moon worship. But as archaeological discoveries have accumulated, it has become clear that prehistoric cultures across the globe were engaged in sophisticated and systematic observation of the heavens. And in many of these cultures, they chose to record their celestial knowledge in the same way, by carving it into stone. Consider, for example, the famous Skidi Pawnee star chart, found on a piece of buckskin in North America but believed to be a copy of much older rock art traditions. This chart, created by the indigenous Pawnee people of Nebraska, shows a series of star clusters and constellations arranged in a circular pattern, with specific stars holding deep significance in their creation myths. The visual language circles and dots representing celestial body Isis, strikingly similar to the diagrams found at Danigala. Or travel to the Coa Valley in northern Portugal, a UNESCO World Heritage Site, where a vast outdoor gallery of Paleolithic rock art, some of it dating back over 20,000 years, includes abstract patterns of dots and lines that many researchers believe are among the oldest star maps ever created. Similarly, in places as far-flung as the deserts of Arizona, the mountains of Armenia, and the remote corners of Australia, ancient petroglyphs have been found that seem to depict specific constellations, eclipses, or even supernova events. The parallels between these sites and Danigala are too numerous to be mere coincidence. They point to a universal human impulse, a fundamental driver of our species that transcends geography and culture. From the moment we became fully human, we have looked up at the night sky with a sense of awe, wonder, and a deep need to find order in its vast, silent spectacle. We are a pattern-seeking species, and the sky is the grandest pattern of all. The act of grouping stars into constellations, of tracing the paths of the sun and moon, and of creating maps to record this knowledge seems to be a foundational part of the human cognitive toolkit. The people of Danigala, though separated by thousands of miles and thousands of years from the people of the Coa Valley or the Skidi Pawnee, were engaged in the exact same intellectual and spiritual project. They were all participating in humanity's first great scientific endeavor, the mapping of the cosmos. The Sri Lankan site is not an outlier. It is a vital and previously unrecognized chapter in this global story of ancient astronomy. The connections become even more specific and intriguing when we return to the strange, stick-like humanoid figures carved on the mountain, the figures that bear such a strong resemblance to the constellation of Orion. The potential depiction of Orion at Danigala links the site to one of the most fascinating and controversial theories in modern alternative archaeology, the Orion correlation theory. This theory, most famously proposed by author Robert Bauval in relation to the pyramids of Giza, suggests that many of the world's most significant ancient monuments were not randomly placed, but were deliberately designed and aligned to mirror the pattern of the stars in the Orion constellation, particularly the three bright stars of Orion's belt. Bauval argued that the layout of the three Great Pyramids at Giza is a perfect terrestrial map of the three stars of Orion's belt, not just in their alignment but also in their relative size, which corresponds to the star's brightness. Since this theory was first proposed, researchers and independent authors have found similar potential Orion correlations all over the world. In Mexico, the three main pyramids on the Avenue of the Dead at Teotihuacan seem to mirror the belt stars. In the American Southwest, the three primary mesas of the Hopi people show a similar layout. The argument is that ancient cultures worldwide shared a profound and specific veneration for this particular constellation, seeing it as a celestial source of creation, rebirth, and divine power, and that they encoded their reverence for it into the very blueprint of their most sacred architecture. The presence of what appear to be depictions of the Orion figure at Danigala adds a powerful piece of evidence to this global puzzle. It suggests that this ancient Sri Lankan culture may have been part of this same lost global cosmology. If the stick figures are indeed Orion, it means the builders of Danigala were not just mapping the stars in a general sense, they were singling out this specific constellation as being of supreme importance, just like the pyramid builders of Egypt and Mesoamerica. This raises a host of tantalizing questions. How could such disparate and unconnected cultures, separated by vast oceans and millennia, all develop the same specific focus on the same group of stars? Mainstream archaeology would argue that it is a simple coincidence Orion is a bright and easily recognizable constellation, so it is natural that many cultures would pay attention to it independently. But for proponents of the Orion correlation theory, it points to something more profound, a shared legacy, a thread of sacred astronomical knowledge that was passed down from a much older, common ancestral source, a lost mother culture that predates all known civilizations. While this remains highly speculative, the carvings at Danigala undeniably add a new and intriguing data point to this enduring global mystery. The sheer complexity of the Danigala site, its unique geology, its long history of occupation, its sophisticated astronomical art, and its possible topographical maps, has led some researchers down an even more speculative path. They propose that Danigala was not just a local ceremonial center, but a major center of ancient wisdom, a kind of prehistoric university where advanced knowledge was curated and preserved. In this view, the petroglyphs are not just simple maps, but a complex library of information, encoding data about astronomy, geography, and perhaps even more esoteric subjects. Was Danigala part of a lost, global network of sacred sites, as some alternative historians like Graham Hancock have proposed? This theory suggests that ancient wisdom keepers traveled the world, sharing a sophisticated body of knowledge about the cosmos, mathematics, and the cyclical nature of time, and that they encoded this knowledge at key nodes around the planet, such as Giza, Stonehenge, Angkor Wat, and perhaps Danigala. In this framework, the mountain's unusual circular, flat-topped shape might not be an accident of geology, but the very reason it was chosen. It may have been seen as the perfect receiving station for celestial energies or a natural platform for making precise astronomical observations. The so-called landing site map takes on a new significance, perhaps not as a map for extraterrestrial craft, but as a geodetic marker, a map that fixed Danigala's precise location in relation to other sacred sites in a global system. This is, of course, deep in the realm of speculation, and there is no hard archaeological evidence to support such a grand, unified theory. Mainstream science rightly demands a higher burden of proof. However, the existence of a site as complex and enigmatic as Danny Gala provides fertile ground for such ideas. It challenges our conventional understanding of the past and forces us to consider that the ancient world may have been far more interconnected and knowledgeable than we currently believe. The mystery of Danny Gala is that it is just plausible enough to make us wonder. Ultimately, after all the scientific analysis, the astronomical modeling, and the speculative theorizing, Danny Gala Mountain remains a profound and beautiful enigma. Its deepest secrets are still locked securely in the stone, protected by the absence of a decipherable written language. We can measure the alignments, we can compare the patterns to constellations, and we can theorize about the rituals that took place on its summit, but we can never be entirely certain. We cannot know what the ancient artists called themselves, what they truly believed about their stick figure sky god, or what specific events they were trying to record in their celestial charts. The lack of a Rosetta Stone for the Danny Gala symbols means that its most detailed messages may be lost to us forever. But what is not lost is the site's powerful and enduring legacy. Danny Gala stands as a monumental rebuttal to any notion of a primitive past. It is a testament to the fact that thousands of years ago, in the jungles of Sri Lanka, a community of people possessed a deep curiosity about the universe, a sophisticated scientific methodology for observing it, and a profound artistic and spiritual drive to record their understanding for posterity. They were scientists, artists, and theologians all at once. The mountain is a powerful Sri Lankan monument to a lost world of incredible intellectual achievement, a world where science and religion were not opposing forces, but two sides of the same coin, both aimed at understanding humanity's place in the cosmos. The unsolved legacy of Danny Gala is, in the end, its greatest gift. It is a place that sparks our imagination, challenges our assumptions, and reminds us that the human story is far older, deeper, and more mysterious than what is written in our history books. It encourages us to look at the world around us and the sky above us with the same sense of wonder and inquiry that must have motivated its creators. The silent, enigmatic carvings are an invitation to keep searching, to keep questioning, and to acknowledge that in the great, unfolding mystery of our own past, there are still entire libraries waiting to be read, written not on paper but in stone. Danny Gala Mountain holds its secrets tightly, but in doing so, it preserves a sense of wonder that is essential to the human spirit. Danny Gala Mountain holds its secrets tightly. The strange symbols carved into its surface are a silent language from a forgotten time, hinting at a sophisticated understanding of the cosmos. Whether it was a temple, an observatory, or a map to the stars, it reminds us that ancient people were not primitive, but keen observers of the universe, leaving mysteries that we are still trying to unravel. 9,000 years ago, in what is now Turkey, there was a city unlike any other. At Catalhoyuk, thousands of people lived in houses without doors or streets, entering their homes through the roof. But the deepest mystery lies within their art, a powerful heavyset goddess who ruled their world. This video explores who this goddess was and her secret connection to the stars. In the vast sun-baked plains of southern Anatolia, in what is now modern-day Turkey, there lies a low, unassuming mound rising gently from the surrounding farmland. To a casual observer, it looks like nothing more than a natural hill, a gentle swell in the earth that has been there for millennia. But this mound, known as Catalhoyuk, is not a feature of geology. It is a feature of history. It is an artificial hill, a tell, built up over 1,400 years by the accumulated debris of human life. And buried within this mound is one of the most important and strangest archaeological sites on the planet. This is not the ruin of a castle, a temple, or a palace. It is the remarkably preserved remains of a city, one of the world's very first cities, a bustling, thriving metropolis that was home to thousands of people more than 9,000 years ago. But the city of Catalhoyuk was unlike any city that has ever existed before or since. It was a city without streets, a city where people lived on top of their dead. A city that forces us to completely rethink our most basic assumptions about what a city is and how human beings can live together. The story of Catalhoyuk's rediscovery begins in the late 1950s. A British archaeologist named James Mellart was surveying the Kanyao Plain, a region known to be a cradle of early agriculture. He was searching for evidence of the Neolithic Revolution, the pivotal moment in human history when our ancestors first transitioned from a nomadic life of hunting and gathering to a settled existence based on farming. Local farmers had told him about this strange, large mound where they often found fragments of ancient pottery and obsidian tools when plowing their fields. Intrigued, Mellart visited the site. What he saw was a massive sprawling mound covering more than 30 acres. He knew immediately that a site of this size could not be a small village. It had to be a major settlement. He began a series of excavations in the early 1960s, and what he and his team uncovered would shock the archaeological world and capture the public imagination. As they began to dig, they were not just finding scattered artifacts. They were finding an entire city, preserved in breathtaking detail. The radiocarbon dates that came back from the site were astonishing. The settlement had been founded around 7,400 BC and was continuously occupied for nearly 1.5 millennia, until about 6,000 BC. This placed Catalhoyuk at the very dawn of the Neolithic Age. It was a contemporary of sites like Jericho, often cited as the world's oldest city, but Catalhoyuk was different. It was not a small town with a defensive wall. It was a vast, sprawling urban center, a true prehistoric metropolis. At its peak, archaeologists estimate that as many as 8,000 people lived here, a population density that would not be seen again in this region for thousands of years. This was a city in every sense of the word, a complex society with a large, stable population. But it was the city's architecture, its very layout, that was so utterly alien and revolutionary. As Mellart's team carefully cleared away the layers of earth, they found that the city was constructed as a single massive, continuous block of buildings. There were no streets. There were no alleyways, no courtyards, no public squares, no open spaces of any kind between the houses. The entire city was a dense, tightly packed honeycomb, a sprawling human beehive made of sun-dried mud brick. The houses were built one right up against the other, sharing party walls, their outer walls forming a solid, continuous defensive perimeter for the entire settlement. It was a city that looked inward, a single gigantic architectural organism. This immediately presented a profound puzzle. If there were no streets and no ground-level doors, how did the thousands of inhabitants get into their homes? The answer was as strange as the layout itself. The archaeologists discovered that the only point of entry and exit for each house was a rectangular opening in the roof. The people of Catalhoyuk lived in a vertical world. Their daily lives were conducted not on streets and sidewalks, but on the interconnected flat rooftops of the city. To get home, a resident would have had to walk across the roofs of their neighbors' houses, perhaps greeting friends and exchanging news along the way, until they reached their own dwelling. They would then climb down a steep, sturdy wooden ladder, which was often found leaning against the south wall of the main room, and descend into the private space of their home. This ladder was the critical link between the public, communal world of the rooftops and the private, familial world of the house below. This unique rooftop world would have shaped every aspect of their social lives. The rooftops were their streets, their public squares, their workshops, and their playgrounds. It was here that much of the daily work would have been done. In the hot Anatolian summer, women would have gathered on the roofs to grind grain, weave textiles, and prepare food, their conversations carrying across the open air. Men would have manufactured their obsidian tools, their sharp blades glinting in the bright sun. Children would have played. their games of chase taking them across the sprawling, multi-leveled roofscape of the city. It would have been a noisy, vibrant, and intensely communal existence. Your neighbor was not just someone who lived next door. Their roof was part of your pathway home. This architectural design fostered a level of social intimacy and interdependence that is hard for us, in our world of private yards and locked doors, to even imagine. It was a city built on a foundation of radical neighborliness, where the public and private spheres were constantly overlapping. The houses themselves, once you descended the ladder, were remarkably standardized in their design, suggesting a society with strong shared cultural conventions. They were rectangular, typically consisting of one large main room and one or two smaller ancillary rooms used for storage. The walls were constructed from mud bricks, which were then covered in a thick layer of smooth white plaster, giving the interiors a clean, bright appearance. The main room was the center of family life. It contained a hearth for cooking and warmth, and raised platforms along the walls that served as areas for sitting, working, and sleeping. The rooms were kept meticulously clean. The archaeological evidence shows that the inhabitants constantly swept their floors and replastered their walls, sometimes applying more than 100 layers of fresh plaster over the life of a house. But beneath these clean, well-kept floors lay the city's deepest and most intimate secret. As the archaeologists began to carefully excavate the floors of the houses, they made a startling and somewhat macabre discovery. Buried directly beneath the sleeping platforms, in shallow pits dug into the earth, were the skeletal remains of the dead. The people of Catalhoyuk did not have separate cemeteries or burial grounds. Their homes were also their tombs. When a member of the family died, they were not removed from the community. They were brought into the very heart of the home. The evidence suggests a complex burial ritual. The body of the deceased was likely taken outside the city and exposed to the elements, or perhaps to vultures, for a period of time until the flesh was gone, a process known as excarnation. The clean, disarticulated bones were then gathered, often wrapped in textiles or placed in baskets, and brought back into the house to be buried beneath the floor. This practice reveals a profound and powerful connection between the living and the dead. The ancestors were not gone. They were simply in a different state of being, their physical presence still a part of the daily life of the household. The family would have literally lived, worked, and slept directly above the bones of their parents, their grandparents, and their children. This was not a culture that feared its dead. It was a culture that cherished them, that kept them close. The ancestors were seen as the foundation of the house, both literally and spiritually. Their presence beneath the floor would have provided a sense of continuity, a tangible link to the family's past, and perhaps they were believed to offer protection and guidance to the living who dwelled above them. On special occasions, it seems the inhabitants would even dig up the skulls of certain important ancestors, plastering them to recreate human features, and using them in household rituals before reburying them. The house was not just a shelter for the living. It was a sanctuary for the entire lineage, a place where the boundary between life and death was porous and constantly being negotiated. While the basic layout of the houses was remarkably consistent across the city, suggesting a highly egalitarian society with little difference in wealth or status, some of the houses were different. As Mellart and later excavation teams continued their work, they uncovered a number of rooms that were far more elaborately decorated than the others. These special rooms contained intricate and powerful art. The plastered walls were covered in vibrant murals, painted with red ochre and other natural pigments. These murals depicted a variety of scenes, geometric patterns that resemble woven textiles, dynamic hunting scenes showing men confronting huge, wild bulls and strange surreal landscapes. But the most striking features were the three-dimensional plaster reliefs that seemed to grow out of the walls, and the arrangements of animal skulls, particularly the massive horns of wild bulls, known as bucrania. These bucrania were clearly objects of immense power and significance. In some rooms, dozens of pairs of horns were found, often set into plastered benches or pillars, their sharp points jutting out into the room. In other reliefs, the form of a woman, her arms and legs outstretched, was depicted giving birth to a bull's head. The sheer density and power of this imagery led James Mellart to believe that these were not ordinary houses. He identified them as shrines, special buildings set apart for the religious life of the community. He theorized that Catalhoyuk society was divided, with a priestly class who lived in these shrines and conducted the city's rituals, while the common people lived in the simpler, undecorated houses. For decades, this shrine theory was the accepted interpretation. It fit a familiar model of how complex societies are organized, with the clear separation between the sacred and the secular. However, more recent and ongoing excavations, led by Professor Ian Hodder of Stanford University, have challenged this view. Hodder's team has shown that there is no clear architectural distinction between a shrine and a house. The so-called shrines have all the same features as a normal house: a hearth, storage rooms, evidence of domestic activity. The only difference is the richness of their decoration. Furthermore, these highly decorated houses are not clustered together in a special temple district. They are scattered randomly throughout the city. This has led to a new and perhaps even more radical interpretation. At Catalhoyuk, there was no separation between religion and daily life. Ritual was not something conducted by priests in a special building. It was an integral part of domestic life, a practice woven into the very fabric of the home. Every family, or at least many families, were responsible for their own rituals, for maintaining their own connection to the spirit world. The more elaborate houses may have belonged to families with a longer history or a more respected lineage, their homes serving as focal points for neighborhood ceremonies, but they were still, first and foremost, homes. This discovery is profound. It suggests a society where the sacred was not set apart, but was embedded in the everyday. The act of entering your home by descending a ladder from the sky world of the rooftop was a ritual act. The act of plastering the walls was a way of renewing the home's purity. And the act of burying your ancestors beneath your feet was a constant communion with the spirit world. The city without streets was also a city without temples because in a way every single house was a temple. This unique architectural and spiritual landscape, a dense, honeycomb city entered from the roof, where the living coexisted intimately with the dead, and where every home was a potential stage for sacred ritual, sets the scene for understanding the deeper mysteries of Catalhoyuk. It was in these intensely private, yet deeply interconnected domestic shrines that the city's most powerful secrets were hidden. The art, the symbols, and the powerful enigmatic deities that governed the lives of its 8,000 inhabitants. As archaeologists delved deeper into the strange interconnected houses of Catalhoyuk, they moved beyond the mysteries of its architecture and into the heart of its spiritual world. Within the plaster walls of the more elaborate homes, the so-called shrines, they discovered a rich and complex world of art and symbolism. This was not art for art's sake. This was a visual language, a powerful system of symbols that expressed the community's deepest beliefs about life, death, and the forces that govern their world. And at the very center of this symbolic universe, one figure reigned supreme, appearing again and again in different forms, each one revealing another facet of her immense power. This was the great deity of Catalhoyuk, a figure so dominant and pervasive that she is often referred to simply as the Mother Goddess. Her presence is the key to understanding the city's soul, revealing a society that venerated the female principle to a degree rarely seen in human history, and hinting at a complex cosmology that wove together the cycles of birth, death, and rebirth. The most famous and iconic representation of this deity was unearthed by the original excavator, James Mellart, in the 1960s, and it has since become a symbol for the entire civilization. It is a small but incredibly powerful statuette, masterfully crafted from fired clay. It depicts a large, heavy-set, and distinctly female figure, seated on a throne. She is not a slender, ethereal goddess of beauty, but a figure of immense physical presence and authority. Her breasts are heavy and full, her stomach is rounded, and her thighs are massive. She exudes an aura of abundance, fertility, and raw, earthy power. But what elevates her from a simple fertility figure to a true queen of the cosmos is her throne. The armrests of her seat are not made of wood or stone. They are formed by the bodies of two powerful felines, most likely leopards, their heads facing forward, their bodies tense, acting as her loyal guardians and symbols of her dominion over the wild, untamed forces of nature. She rests her hands possessively on their heads, a gesture of absolute command. This single artifact, known as the seated woman of Catalhoyuk, is a masterpiece of symbolic expression. It tells us that the primary deity of this great city was female, and that her power was multifaceted. She was a mother, her large body a symbol of life-giving fertility and nourishment, the source from which the community drew its sustenance. But she was also a queen, a powerful ruler, enthroned and in command of the most dangerous predators of the natural world. She was the mistress of the animals, a powerful archetype found in many ancient mythologies, a deity who bridges the gap between the civilized world of the city and the wild world of nature that surrounded it. This figurine was found in what appeared to be a grain bin, suggesting a direct link between her power and the agricultural abundance that sustained the city's 8,000 inhabitants. She was the ultimate source of all life and all food. But this enthroned queen was just one of the many forms the goddess took. Throughout the houses of Catalhoyuk, her image appears in a variety of contexts, each one shedding more light on her complex character. One of the most common depictions, found both as small figurines and as three-dimensional reliefs emerging from the plaster walls, shows the goddess in the act of giving birth. In these images, her legs are splayed wide, and the head of a child, or sometimes the head of a bull or a ram, is shown emerging from her body. This imagery is direct and unambiguous. It emphasizes her role as the great creator, the primal source from which all life, both human and animal, originates. The house itself, with its single entrance in the roof, has been interpreted by some as a symbolic womb, and the latter as a symbolic umbilical cord connecting the inhabitants to the sky world above. The act of descending the ladder into the home was a daily reenactment of birth, a return to the safety and nourishment of the Great Mother's embrace. The goddess, in this context, was not a distant celestial being. Her presence and her life-giving power were embedded in the very architecture of daily life. However, the goddess of Catalhoyuk was not just a benevolent creator and a nurturing mother. She also held dominion over the darker, more terrifying aspects of existence: death and decay. This dual nature is revealed in a series of dramatic and somewhat unsettling murals found on the walls of the more elaborate houses. These murals depict huge, menacing vultures, their wings outstretched, swooping down upon small headless human bodies. For a long time this was interpreted as a simple scene of carnage, a warning about the dangers of the wild. But a deeper understanding of the city's burial practices has revealed a far more profound meaning. As we know, the people of Catalhoyuk practiced excarnation, leaving their dead exposed for a period of time to be defleshed before the bones were collected for burial. The vultures, therefore, were not just scavengers. They were sacred and essential intermediaries in the death process. They were the agents of the goddess, the creatures who consumed the corruptible flesh and released the enduring spirit, preparing the individual for the next stage of their journey. In this context, the headless bodies in the murals are not victims. They are individuals undergoing a sacred transformation, and the goddess herself is sometimes depicted in a form that connects her directly to this process. In some reliefs, she is shown as a powerful, full-bodied female figure, but without a head, her form mirroring the headless corpses in the vulture murals. In other, more abstract representations, her form seems to merge with that of a great bird, or she is shown flanked by two vultures, just as her enthroned form is flanked by two leopards. This reveals her as a goddess of death and transformation, a deity who presided over the entire cycle of existence. She was not just the giver of life, she was also the receiver of the dead. She was the womb from which life emerged, and she was the tomb to which it eventually returned. This cyclical understanding of life and death, with the goddess as the central axis around which everything turned, was a sophisticated and powerful cosmology. It provided the people of Catalhoyuk with a way to understand and accept the inevitability of death, seeing it not as an end, but as a necessary transition in a never-ending cycle of rebirth, a journey managed and overseen by their powerful and multifaceted deity. While the female principle was clearly dominant in the spiritual world of Catalhoyuk, she was not entirely alone. A male figure does appear in the city's art, but he is consistently portrayed in a role that is secondary and subordinate to the great goddess. He is often depicted as a bearded man, sometimes riding or confronting a great bull, the most powerful and dangerous animal in their world. He is shown as a hunter, a master of the wild, a figure of virility and physical strength. In some interpretations, he is seen as the consort or the son of the goddess, the youthful mortal figure whose life and death are also part of the great cycle she governs. The bull itself, with its massive size, its raw power, and its crescent-shaped horns, was an incredibly important symbol at Catalhoyuk. The walls of the shrines are famously decorated with dozens of real bucrania, the plastered skulls and horns of wild bulls, their points jutting menacingly into the room. These bull symbols are almost always associated with the male principle. In the famous hunting shrines, dramatic murals show scores of small male figures hunting and teasing gigantic bulls, a dangerous and likely ritualistic activity. The bull represented the untamed power of nature, masculine virility, and perhaps the male element in the divine partnership. However, his power was always contextualized by the greater power of the goddess. In the relief that shows the goddess giving birth to a bull's head, her role as the ultimate source is made explicit. The male principle in all its wild strength is born from her. He is a product of her creative power, not her equal. This consistent symbolic hierarchy, the powerful, enthroned, life-giving and death-wielding goddess, and her younger, more dynamic, but ultimately subordinate male consort is a defining feature of Catalhoyuk's religious art. The overwhelming dominance of female imagery and the powerful authoritative depiction of the goddess have led many researchers, particularly during the feminist wave of archaeology in the 1970s and 80s, to propose that Catalhoyuk was a true matriarchal society. The theory was that if their primary deity was female, then the society itself must have been led by women. It was envisioned as a peaceful, goddess-worshipping utopia, a world where women held the positions of power as priestesses and clan leaders, and where society was organized around matrilineal descent, where lineage is traced through the mother. This idea of a great Stone Age matriarchy was incredibly appealing, offering a powerful counter-narrative to the traditionally male-dominated story of human history. Catalhoyuk, with its powerful goddess art, became the poster child for this theory. However, as more scientific and data-driven archaeological work has been conducted at the site, particularly under the leadership of Ian Hodder, this romantic vision of a matriarchy has been seriously challenged. The evidence from the bones themselves tells a different, more nuanced story. A detailed analysis of the hundreds of skeletons buried beneath the house floors has shown no significant difference in the health, diet, or workload between men and women. Both men and women seem to have eaten the same food and performed a similar range of physical tasks. There is no evidence that one sex had privileged access to resources or lived a life of greater ease than the other. Furthermore, there are no royal burials. No graves of women have been found with significantly more wealth or symbols of authority than the graves of men. The society appears, from a purely physical and economic standpoint, to have been remarkably egalitarian. So how do we reconcile the evidence of an egalitarian society with the evidence of a completely female-dominated religious art? The current thinking is that we must be careful not to project our own modern assumptions about the relationship between religion and social power onto the past. It is entirely possible for a society to venerate a powerful female deity, or to see the female principle as the ultimate source of life and cosmic power, without that translating directly into a political system where women hold all the power over men. The goddess of Catalhoyuk may have represented a universal principle of fertility, creation, and the cyclical nature of the world, a principle that was revered and respected by both men and women equally. Her dominance in the art may reflect a shared worldview, a collective understanding of how the universe worked, rather than a social or political hierarchy. Catalhoyuk, then, may not have been a matriarchy in the political sense, but it was undeniably a gynocentric society in the spiritual Sensi society, whose entire symbolic and religious world was centered on the awesome and multifaceted power of the female. The reign of the mother goddess at Catalhoyuk represents a worldview that is profoundly different from the patriarchal, male god-dominated religions that would come to define most of later Western and Near Eastern history. It is a glimpse into a different kind of human consciousness, one where the primary creative force in the universe was envisioned as female, and where the great cycles of nature, birth, growth, death, and rebirth were seen as the fundamental truths of existence. The art she left behind, from the powerful queen on her leopard throne to the cosmic mother giving birth to the world, provides us with our most direct connection to the minds of the people who lived in this strange and wonderful city. Her symbols are the alphabet of their faith, and learning to read them is the first step in unlocking the even deeper astronomical secrets that may be hidden within their cosmic worship system. The rich symbolic world of Catalhoyuk, dominated by the powerful figure of the mother goddess and her consort, the bull, provides a deep insight into the spiritual life of this ancient metropolis. It was a world centered on the great, earthly cycles of fertility, birth, death, and regeneration. But was their gaze directed only downwards, towards the earth and the underworld where their ancestors lay buried? Or did they also look up, to the vast silent spectacle of the night sky, seeking a connection between the cycles of life on earth and the grand eternal cycles of the cosmos? For a long time, the art of Catalhoyuk was interpreted as being purely chthonic and terrestrial. But a new wave of research, re-examining some of the city's most famous and enigmatic art through an archaeoastronomical lens, is beginning to reveal a series of stunning and secret astronomical connections. These discoveries suggest that the people of Catalhoyuk were not just farmers and goddess worshippers. They were also keen and sophisticated observers of the heavens, and they wove their celestial knowledge into the very fabric of their art, their architecture, and their rituals. One of the most famous and debated pieces of art ever discovered at Catalhoyuk is a large, vibrant mural that was found on the wall of a particularly elaborate house, or shrine. When it was first unearthed by James Mellart in the 1960s, it was hailed as a discovery of global importance. The world's oldest map. The mural consists of two distinct parts. The lower section shows a series of rectangular boxes, arranged in a terrace pattern that looks strikingly similar to the honeycomb layout of the city of Catalhoyuk itself, as seen from above. Towering over this city plan in the upper section of the mural is a large mountain-like shape, speckled with dots, from which lines and more dots seem to be erupting. Mellart interpreted this as a topographical map, depicting the town of Catalhoyuk with the nearby twin-peaked volcano, Hassan Dag, shown in the background in a dramatic state of eruption. For decades, this interpretation was accepted, and the mural was celebrated in textbooks and documentaries as a remarkable piece of prehistoric cartography, a testament to the sophisticated spatial awareness of the city's inhabitants. However, in recent years, this long-held interpretation has been challenged by a new and compelling astronomical theory. Dr. Eberhard Zanger, a geoarchaeologist, has pointed out several problems with the volcano map theory. Firstly, while Hassan Dag is a volcano, there is no geological evidence that it was actively erupting during the time Catalhoyuk was occupied. Secondly, the perspective is strange. One would have to be floating high in the air to see both the city plan and the mountain in this configuration. Dr. Zanger and other researchers have proposed a radical alternative. What if the mural is not a map of the earth but a map of the sky? In this astronomical interpretation, the lower section with its grid-like pattern might still represent the city, the earthly realm. But the upper section is seen as a depiction of a celestial event. The large, double-peak shape is reinterpreted not as a volcano, but as the symbolic representation of a powerful animal, perhaps a bull or a leopard, which were potent symbols in Catalhoyuk's cosmology. The most intriguing part of this theory concerns the speckles or spots that cover the mountain's surface. Mellart saw them as volcanic bombs being ejected from the volcano. But what if they are stars? The pattern of dots bears a resemblance to the star cluster of the Hyades, which, along with the star Aldebaran, forms the distinctive V-shape of the head of the constellation Taurus, the bull. The eruption could then be a symbolic representation of a meteor shower, a comet, or another dramatic celestial event that appeared to emanate from that specific part of the sky. This theory transforms the mural from a simple map into a complex cosmological diagram, a snapshot of a moment when a significant event in the heavens was observed above the city. It suggests that the people of Catalhoyuk were not just tracking the regular, predictable cycles of the sun and moon, but were also paying close attention to the fixed stars and to unpredictable, transient celestial phenomena. The leopard skin patterns that frequently appear in their art could be another piece of this puzzle. Instead of just representing the animal, the pattern of spots might also have been a symbolic shorthand for the starry night sky itself. If this theory is correct, then this famous mural is a record of a profound moment of contact between the city and the cosmos, a moment so important that it was immortalized on the wall of a sacred space. The celestial connections at Catalhoyuk are not limited to this single, debated mural. They can be found embedded in the most common and powerful symbols in the city, the horns of the wild bull. As we've seen, the Bucraniae plastered skulls and horns of oryx were a dominant feature of the city's ritual spaces. They were mounted on walls, set into benches, and used as pillars, their sharp points projecting into the room with a palpable sense of power. The traditional interpretation sees them purely as a symbol of the male principle, of hunting prowess, of untamed natural strength. But when viewed with an astronomical eye, the horns take on an entirely new and profound layer of meaning. The elegant, curved shape of a pair of bull's horns is a perfect, natural symbol for the crescent moon. The moon, with its dramatic and easily observable cycle of waxing and waning, was of immense importance to almost all ancient cultures. Its 29.5-day cycle provided the basis for the first calendars, the concept of the month. Its phases, from the slender sliver of the new moon to the full, bright orb, and back to darkness, were a powerful metaphor for the cycles of life, death, and rebirth. It is highly likely that the people of Catalhoyuk, who were so attuned to cycles, were also meticulous observers of the moon. The theory proposes that the omnipresent Bucrania were not just hunting trophies. They were a sacred architectural symbol for the lunar crescent. The shrines, therefore, were not just dedicated to a generic goddess and her bull consort. They were lunar temples. The placement of the horns within the houses may have been a way of tracking the lunar cycle. Perhaps different sets of horns were used or decorated in specific ways to mark the new moon, the first quarter, the full moon, and the last quarter. The rituals performed in these spaces would have been timed to the phases of the moon, with important ceremonies taking place on the full moon or the dark moon. The bull, then, was not just a symbol of earthly masculine power. He was a celestial being, a moon bull, whose horns mirrored the sacred crescent in the night sky. This connects the earthly male principle, the bull, with the celestial feminine principle, the moon, often seen as a female deity in ancient cultures, creating a rich and complex symbolic partnership. It weaves the sky and the earth together, suggesting that the great goddess and her bull consort were not just terrestrial figures, but cosmic deities whose story was played out both on the land and in the heavens. The astronomical symbolism at Catalhoyuk may extend even further, into the very heart of its death rituals. As we saw, the city's art is filled with images of death and transformation, most notably the murals depicting large vultures descending upon headless human corpses. This imagery is directly linked to their practice of excarnation. But some researchers, particularly those who study the broader patterns of Neolithic and megalithic beliefs, have proposed a fascinating connection between this vulture goddess imagery and another major constellation, Cygnus, the swan. Cygnus is a large and easily recognizable constellation, also known as the Northern Cross. Due to the precession of the equinoxes thousands of years ago, Cygnus was a circumpolar constellation, meaning it never set below the horizon. It was a constant, eternal presence in the night sky. In the mythology of many ancient cultures, birds, particularly large water birds like swans, geese, or cranes, were seen as psychopomps, creatures that could travel between the earthly world and the spirit world, guiding the souls of the dead on their final journey. The theory suggests that the great bird depicted in so many ancient mythologies was, in fact, the constellation Cygnus. This connection is most strongly argued for at another, even older Anatolian site, Göbekli Tepe. There, on a pillar known as the Vulture Stone, we see a clear depiction of a vulture standing next to a headless human figure. Proponents of the theory argue that this is a direct representation of the constellation Cygnus guiding the soul, the head, of the deceased into the afterlife via the Milky Way, which the constellation sits upon. The parallels with the art at Çatalhöyük are striking. The combination of vultures and headless bodies is the same. It is highly possible that the people of Çatalhöyük shared this same ancient belief system, a cosmology that was already ancient by the time their city was founded. In this view, the vulture goddess of Çatalhöyük was also the celestial swan. The murals were not just depicting the physical process of excarnation. They were depicting the spiritual journey that followed. They were showing the soul of the deceased being carried away by the great celestial bird to its final resting place in the starry river of the Milky Way. This would mean that their understanding of death was fundamentally astronomical. The journey to the afterlife was a journey to the stars, and the constellation of Cygnus was the gateway. Finally, we must consider the city's unique architecture as a potential astronomical tool in itself. The design of Çatalhöyük, a dense honeycomb of houses with no streets and access only from the roof, created a vast, elevated, and communal living space. This sprawling, interconnected roofscape would have been a perfect platform for astronomical observation. In a world without the light pollution that plagues our modern cities, the night sky over the Anatolian plain would have been a breathtaking spectacle, a high-definition dome of glittering stars. From their rooftops, the inhabitants of Çatalhöyük would have had an unobstructed, 360-degree view of the horizon. This elevated platform would have been a massive citywide communal observatory. Different families or clans could have been responsible for observing different sections of the sky. They could have used the corners of their roof openings, or perhaps specially erected wooden posts on the rooftops, as foresights to mark the rising and setting positions of the sun, moon, and key stars. The alignment of the ladders, which were consistently placed against the south wall of the main room, might also have had an astronomical significance, perhaps aligning with the position of the midday sun at certain times of the year. The entire city could have been a living, breathing observatory, with thousands of people participating in the collective act of watching the sky. The rooftops were not just their streets and workshops, they were their windows to the cosmos. The celestial events they observed from their roofs would have determined the timing of the rituals they performed in the shrines below, creating a perfect synthesis between the sky world above and the domestic, ritual world within their homes. When we combine these different threads of evidence, the potential star chart of the volcano mural, the lunar symbolism of the bull's horns, the cosmic death journey represented by the vultures and Cygnus, and the observatory-like function of the city's rooftops, a new and incredibly rich picture of Çatalhöyük's spiritual life begins to emerge. It was not just a simple fertility cult. It was a complex and sophisticated cosmic worship system. The people of Catalhoyuk saw their world as an integrated whole, a place where the cycles of the earth were a direct reflection of the grand cycles of the heavens. The birth of a child in the house mirrored the birth of the moon in the sky. The death of a person and their burial beneath the floor was the beginning of a celestial journey to the stars. The planting of the crops was timed to the movements of the sun, and the rituals performed to ensure that harvests were timed to the phases of the moon. Their goddess was not just an earth mother. She was a queen of the cosmos, a deity whose power encompassed the earth, the underworld, and the starry heavens. The secret astronomical connections at Catalhoyuk reveal a society of profound intellectual and spiritual depth, a people who lived in a state of constant, intimate dialogue with the universe. The remarkable city of Catalhoyuk, with its unique rooftop world, its intimate connection to the dead, and its powerful goddess-centric cosmic worship system, is a site of immense importance in its own right. It is a time capsule, offering an unprecedentedly detailed glimpse into a moment of profound transformation in human history. But to truly grasp its significance, we must zoom out from the specifics of its art and architecture and consider its legacy. Catalhoyuk is not just an isolated archaeological curiosity. It is a key piece of evidence in several of the most significant and debated questions about our collective past. Its legacy challenges our fundamental assumptions about the development of religion, the nature of early civilization, and the very trajectory of human social organization. It stands as a monument to a forgotten world, a different path that humanity once took, leaving us with a series of tantalizing questions and profound lessons that are still unfolding today. The most powerful and influential legacy of Catalhoyuk is its role as the quintessential example of what the renowned Lithuanian-American archaeologist Marija Gimbutas called Old Europe. Gimbutas was a brilliant but controversial scholar who, through her extensive study of Neolithic artifacts from across southeastern Europe, proposed a grand and revolutionary theory. She argued that before the arrival of the patriarchal, warlike, horse-riding Indo-European peoples from the Russian steppes, the ancestors of most modern Europeans, the continent was home to a completely different kind of civilization. This old Europe, she claimed, was a widespread, sophisticated, and remarkably peaceful collection of cultures that flourished for thousands of years. And the defining characteristic of this civilization was its religion. They worshipped a great goddess. According to Gimbutas, the belief system of Old Europe was centered on a powerful, multifaceted female deity who represented the entirety of the natural world and the great cycles of life, death, and regeneration. This goddess was not a single, simple fertility figure. She was the creator, the destroyer, the mistress of the animals, the queen of the underworld, and the source of all life. Gimbutas's work identified a common symbolic language used across this vast region: spirals, meanders, bull's horns, and bird imagery, all linked to the worship of this great goddess. She argued that these societies were largely egalitarian and peaceful, and likely matristic or matrilineal, meaning that social organization and lineage were centered on women, not men. This civilization, she proposed, was eventually overrun and its goddess-worshipping culture suppressed by the invading Indo-Europeans around 4000 to 3000 BC, who brought with them their pantheon of male sky gods, their hierarchical social structures, and their glorification of warfare. When Catalhoyuk was discovered, it was like finding the capital city of Gimbutas's lost world. The site provided a stunning real-world confirmation of many of her theories. Here, in breathtaking detail, was a major Neolithic center where the archaeological evidence for a dominant female deity was undeniable. The seated woman on her leopard throne, the figures giving birth, the goddess of transformation associated with vulture sit was all there. A perfect illustration of the multifaceted great goddess that Gimbutas had described. The abundance of female figurines compared to the rarity of male ones, the clear symbolic subordination of the male bull figure to the female goddess, it all pointed to a society that held the female principle as supreme. Catalhoyuk, with its astonishing age and its incredible preservation, became the heartland, the prime exhibit, for the civilization of Old Europe. It proved that this was not just a theoretical construction based on scattered pottery fragments, but a living, breathing reality. The city stands as a powerful testament to a time when much of the world envisioned the divine in female form, a profound counterpoint to the male-dominated religions that would later come to shape Western civilization. The second crucial aspect of Çatalhöyük's legacy is its potential as a model for a large-scale, peaceful, non-violent society. One of the most striking features of the city, especially given its size and incredible population density, is the almost complete lack of evidence for organized warfare or systemic violence. In the ruins of most ancient cities, archaeologists typically find clear evidence of conflict. Massive defensive walls, battlements, watchtowers, layers of ash and destruction from conquest, and caches of weapons like swords, spears, and shields. Skeletons are often found with signs of violent death, skulls crushed by mace heads, ribs pierced by arrowheads. Çatalhöyük has none of this. The city's outer wall was formed by the back-to-back construction of houses, a passive form of defense, but there are no moats, no towers, no fortifications built for organized military defense. Furthermore, the excavations have not unearthed significant caches of weapons. While the inhabitants certainly had hunting tools like arrowheads and spears, there is no evidence of a dedicated warrior class or a centrally organized military. Most tellingly, the analysis of the thousands of skeletons buried beneath the floors shows very few instances of violent trauma. People died from disease, from accidents, and from the general hardships of Neolithic life, but they do not appear to have been killing each other on a large scale. This peaceful character extends to the social structure as well. In most early cities, the rise of urbanism is accompanied by the rise of social hierarchy. We find palaces for kings, elaborate temples for a priestly elite, and vastly different types of housing and burials that reflect a stratified society of rich and poor, rulers and ruled. Again, Çatalhöyük is different. There are no palaces. There are no monumental temples that are architecturally distinct from the houses. And as we've seen, there are no royal burials. The grave goods found with the dead are modest and show little variation between individuals or between men and women. This has led many researchers to see Çatalhöyük as a remarkable example of a large, complex, but fundamentally egalitarian and peaceful society. For 1,400 years, a population of up to 8,000 people managed to live together in incredibly close quarters without developing the institutions of warfare, social stratification, and centralized authority that we often assume are inevitable consequences of urban living. How did they achieve this? The answer may lie in their unique architecture and their powerful, shared belief system. The honeycomb-like layout of the city, with its shared walls and rooftop living, would have fostered an intense sense of community and interdependence. Your survival and well-being were directly tied to the survival and well-being of your neighbors. This, combined with a powerful, unifying religious ideology centered on the goddess and the cycles of domestic life, may have created a social fabric strong enough to resolve conflicts and manage society without the need for kings, priests, or soldiers. Çatalhöyük challenges our cynical modern assumptions that human beings, when gathered in large numbers, will inevitably resort to violence and inequality. It offers a tantalizing glimpse of a different possibility, a model of a large-scale cooperative society that, for a time at least, seems to have actually worked. Like all great ancient civilizations, however, the world of Çatalhöyük eventually came to an end. After nearly 1.5 millennia of continuous occupation, a period of time longer than the entire history of the Roman Empire, the city began to decline. Around 6000 BC, the population started to shrink, and by 5700 BC, the site was completely abandoned, left to the wind and the rain to be slowly buried beneath layers of earth. The mystery of its decline is the final puzzle of its story. Just as with its founding, the end of Çatalhöyük was not a single dramatic event. The archaeological record shows no signs of a great fire, no evidence of a devastating earthquake, and most importantly, no indication of a military conquest. The city was not destroyed, it simply faded away. So why did the people leave? Archaeologists have proposed several theories, all of which may have contributed to the city's demise. One of the leading theories is environmental degradation. A population of 8,000 people, living in the same spot for 1,400 years, would have placed an immense strain on the local environment. The surrounding forests would have been stripped bare to provide the thousands of massive wooden posts needed for their houses and the fuel for their daily fires. The soil of their nearby fields, farmed intensively for centuries, would have become exhausted and less productive. The nearby Karsamba River, which was the lifeblood of the city, may have changed its course or become polluted, making life more difficult. A period of significant climate change, perhaps a prolonged drought, could have been the final straw, making the location no longer viable for such a large population. Another possibility is that the society simply outgrew its own model. The very things that made Catalhoyuk successful, its intense communalism, its dense living conditions, may have also been its undoing. Living in such close proximity would have made the population highly susceptible to the rapid spread of infectious diseases. Furthermore, as the population grew, the social mechanisms that had worked to maintain peace and equality may have begun to break down. The tightly packed, inward-looking city may have started to feel restrictive and stifling. At the same time, new social and technological ideas were spreading across Anatolia. The concept of more individualized, freestanding farmsteads was emerging, offering a different, perhaps more appealing way of life. It may be that the people of Catalhoyuk did not flee a disaster, but simply chose to disperse, to break up into smaller, more independent communities, leaving the great mother city behind in favor of a new social experiment. The end of Catalhoyuk may not have been a collapse, but a deliberate transformation. The ultimate legacy of Catalhoyuk is that of a profound and ongoing discovery. Despite more than 60 years of excavation since its rediscovery, the work has barely scratched the surface. It is estimated that less than 5% of this vast prehistoric metropolis has been scientifically excavated. The other 95%, thousands of houses, hundreds of shrines, the remains of tens of thousands of people, still lies buried. A vast untapped archive of the Neolithic world. The ongoing work at the site, using the latest scientific techniques, continues to reveal new insights every season. DNA analysis of the human remains is helping us to understand the genetic relationships between the people who lived in the same house for generations. Isotopic analysis of their bones is revealing the details of their diet and where they traveled. And chemical analysis of the residues in their pottery is telling us what they cooked and what plants they used for medicine or ritual. Catalhoyuk is a time capsule from one of the most pivotal moments in the human story, the moment we chose to live together in large numbers, the moment we invented the concept of the city. But the model of urbanism it presents is utterly different from the one that eventually came to dominate the world. It was a city that looked inward, not outward. A city built on communalism, not individualism. A society that appears to have been remarkably peaceful and egalitarian. And a spiritual world that was centered on the power of the female and the intimate cycles of domestic life. It is a powerful reminder that the way we live now in society structured by hierarchy, economic competition, and often violence is not the only way. It is not an inevitable outcome of human nature. The people of Catalhoyuk show us that other paths were possible, that other models of civilization existed. As archaeologists continue to peel back the layers of earth at this incredible site, they are not just uncovering the history of a single ancient city. They are uncovering a part of our own forgotten heritage, revealing a chapter of the human story that was almost completely lost. Catalhoyuk is a challenge to our modern certainties, a mirror that reflects a different version of ourselves. It holds its deepest secrets still, but what it has already revealed has forever changed our understanding of our own past. and it stands as a tantalizing promise of the even greater wonders that still lie waiting to be discovered in the silent, buried world beneath our feet. Catalhoyuk is more than just an ancient city. It is a window into a different kind of human consciousness. It was a world where ancestors were buried underfoot, where the goddess reigned supreme, and where the cycles of life, death, and the cosmos were intricately woven together. As archaeologists continued to peel back its layers, they reveal a lost civilization that challenges our most basic assumptions about our own past. If the past still whispers to you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Ancient Relics Keeper, because some mysteries were never meant to be buried.